you go. This is Emily C., my new bestie.
I hate the idea that someone out there hates me. I even hate thinking that Al-Qaeda hates me. I think if they got to know me, they wouldn't hate me.
This stole the show. Emily C. was phenomenal.
There's something you need to know.
What?
You're doing great.
Look at my baby. Here she is. Emily. 10 out of 10. Huge fan.
I see Emily C says 123. I trust her. She's really good.
Listen, Turtle. You gotta watch your language. I'm already live. So you need to follow the FCC guidelines. Shh.
She destroyed, left nothing in her path. It was so good.
Good morning, everybody. Oh, hold on one second. Oh, goodness. I thought I was ready. Hold, please. Okay. We're not ready. There's a lot of documents, so I was just trying to get everything organized in a way that makes this easy for us today, and I'm still not entirely sure I did that, but we're here, and I'm excited to be here, and we're going to have some fun. I'm Emily C. You might know me as Trooper Proctor or Yuri or Joe Paul, who's just stayed out of all of this. Good job, Trooper Paul. But today I'm just me. And today we are going to be reading some documents. Now, I want to be really clear about a couple of things. I don't have any additional expertise to lend to these documents beyond my knowledge of the case, but I think a lot of you do. So my goal for today is, number one, to just get the information out to as many of you as possible. And then number two, I'm going to try really hard to somehow read the documents that we're going to look at and watch the chat, because I think that you guys are going to be able to point some things out that might be weird or make some connections that I'm not able to make based on what you know about police procedure or just how these things work. I need to take a deep breath. I've been rushing around doing 100,000 things, but then we're going to get started. I want to see you guys. What's this? Leslie said, "Good morning. You motivated me to go through my old photographs to see if I had a picture of that day, and I do. There was about 3 inches of snow on the ground when I went to feed my chicken lady." Sweet, that's so cute. At 9 a.m. Yeah, the snow has always bothered me because it's the one lie that kind of just got left unchecked through everything. Good morning. Good morning, neighbor. Good morning, Mitchell. Good morning, everybody. This is fun. It's very, very cold here. So if you're local and you're trapped inside because it's dangerously cold and thank you, too cold to go outside, I hope that this can be an entertaining way for you to spend your day. Oh my gosh, it's even cold not here. Yeah, how is it in Texas? Is it nice anywhere in the country today? How's Arizona? I feel like Arizona is just always nice. I saw people running. They're a whole running group went by my house this morning, and I was like, oh, you guys have a different level of life motivation than I do. So great job to those runners. I'm very in awe of you. Loophole Lawyers said he's watching. Okay. It's hot here in Australia. That's so nice. I'm jealous. -43 in Northern Ontario, Canada. I don't even know what to do with that information. What? Sup, Bo? Okay, the other thing I want to be really clear about before we get started, because I think that there was a couple people like after the first round of sidebars that had this feeling. So I want to like address it off the bat. I'm never expecting there to be like a full like smoking gun in any of these documents. Like we're not going to see an like a interview question with Tully that's like, and what time did you crack the tail light and bring it over to 34 Fairview to plant it to frame Karen Reed? Like that's not what we're going to be getting. So if you're expecting to get like the smoking gun that like solves this whole case, like unfortunately that's not going to happen. But I do think number one, just generally in life, the more information about a topic, the better. It just helps you understand everything better. But in this case specifically, I think because we know the details of the case so well, we are like itching for any little detail that we can fill in that we don't know already. And we can kind of like notice more inconsistencies based on what we already know. And we can just get to know the people involved a little bit better and understand their mindset, understand the way that they operate. We can notice when it's clear that they're lying about something, and kind of like understand what that situation is that they're lying about and speculate on why. So that's what I'm hoping that we can kind of collectively do together today. How does that sound? I tried to make things a little bit easier for myself and for you guys by making as much as I could into slides. This first slide is what inspired this stream right now. It was a text from Corey at 6:22 a.m. where she said, I need someone to read me the IA transcripts. And I was like, say no more. So I'm going to do my best Melanie Little for you all today while she's in a warm place. She's a lucky lady. While she enjoys Cancun. And before we get started, number two, I need to give the biggest, hugest shout out to ER39431 blank space on Twitter, X, because she is the one that submitted the FOIA request to get us these documents. And then I've joked that I am now Corey's secretary on Twitter, which I am honored to do this job. And she reached out to me about how to get the documents to Corey. And we were discussing what's in them and blah, blah, blah. And now we're here. I really loved her mindset, the blank space mindset about these documents. Her whole reason for doing this was like, she said, I just want more people to see these. I want more people to have them. I want more people talking about them. I want more people analyzing them. So I really appreciate that her kind of mindset for doing the FOIA request and for getting these to us is just for the public to have as much information as possible. I have about 100 drinks today so that we can get through this. And we're going to have some fervent song breaks during the documents. So if you ever feel like I've been talking for too long or you're feeling frustrated with Tully to the point that you need a breather, please let me know in the chat and we will have a fervent song break and all will be right in the world again. Okay, let's get started. Oh, and yes, Free the First Amendment. I like your name and I like your picture. Your picture makes me feel very calm. Asked, are there going to be more sidebars coming out soon? The next round of sidebars are going to be released or sent to Corey on February 17th. And I wish it were sooner, but I'm hoping that means that it will be the entire rest of the first trial. fingers crossed, which means we're going to be getting the inverted video sidebars, and I'm very excited about that. So February 17th, mark your calendar. Good morning. Yeah, right now the drinks that I have are a vitamin water, a seltzer, a Celsius, and a water. But by the end of this, I might need a bottle of wine. Yay, hello. And okay, so let's get started. There were in the folder of documents, there were 20 files, I believe. Doesn't it usually tell you how many? Yeah, okay, I think that's 20. And they, a couple of them were just kind of like the handbook on how they do evaluations and stuff. We're not going to go through that. But this first one, and I tried to put them in order as best I could. This first one is a letter from Lieutenant Colonel Robert Schumacher to Major Keith, oh no, sorry, other way around, to Lieutenant Colonel Robert Schumacher from Major Keith Egan. And if you are like me and you like to be able to picture the people that you're reading about, I looked up their LinkedIn, so those are their pictures. And the subject line says, request for personnel investigation, Detective Lieutenant Brian Tully. 1, on Friday, July 12th, 2024, I was made aware of potential misconduct involving Detective Lieutenant Brian Tully, which occurred in the month of May 2024 at an unknown location. Detective Lieutenant Tully failed to take appropriate corrective action concerning inappropriate text messages between members of the department and failed to appropriately review and evaluate the performance of those members. 2, I respectfully request that an investigation be initiated into the allegation of Detective Lieutenant Tully's failure to take appropriate corrective action concerning inappropriate text messages and failure to appropriately review and evaluate the performance of those members. So, respectfully signed, Keith Egan. I think this is important for us also, going back to what I started with, to kind of frame everything. All of this investigation is into the way that Tully responded when he learned about Michael Proctor's text messages. So it's not getting into how he conducted the investigation into the death of John O'Keefe, although there is a little bit that kind of comes up like tangentially. But it really is mostly centered on the way that he responded to finding out about Proctor's text messages and like what he was supposed to do and what he actually did. So I think that's important for us to keep in mind that that's what this is going to be focused on. Thank you. I really like being organized. It makes me feel calmer than normal, which is still not very calm. Okay, so then based on that, I need to stop closing this. Based on that, Detective Lieutenant Stephen McDonald, which it's unclear how, I wish that there was like an actual like chain of, just for my own like understanding, an actual chain of like how it got to this person. Like, how did you guys talk? How did you find out about this? But Detective Lieutenant Stephen McDonald from the Office of Professional Integrity and Accountability sent this letter to Brian Tully, and the subject says, Office of Professional Integrity and Accountability. 1, this notice is to inform you that the department has identified you as the subject of an official personnel investigation being conducted by the Office of Professional Integrity and Accountability. This investigation was initiated by Major Keith Egan after being apprised of allegations of your potential failure to take appropriate corrective action concerning inappropriate text messages between members of the department and failure to appropriately review and evaluate the performance of those members. 2, prior to having conversation with you, directing you to answer questions regarding this investigation, there's a random comma in there that doesn't belong there. You must be advised of your rights concerning personnel investigations and call your attention to Article 27 of the current collective bargaining agreement and policy and procedure ADM 14. For your review and in conformance with Article 27 of the collective bargaining agreement, I have attached a copy of the to from generated by Major Egan requesting a personnel investigation. During the investigation, it will be necessary for me to speak with you regarding this matter. If you have any questions or concerns regarding this matter, please contact me at the phone numbers listed below. And then there was an email correspondence. How do I do this? So then they include, this is what I was just saying I wish they had. They include the email correspondence back and forth from Stephen McDonald to Michael Blanchette. And then Attorney Burke, looks like Jared Burke is Tully's lawyer. Is that correct? Afternoon DLT Tully, attached, they really like commas, attached comma, please find an official blah, blah, blah from Stephen McDonald. Okay. So there's that. And Megan said, but Tully is such a good guy though. And I agree, there is something very satisfying about kind of like seeing people that we have seen do bad things, like finally get a little bit of consequences. We know that at the end of this, really, the consequences are not what I believe. Or I think that he deserves more. But there is a part of me on like a human level that is like a little bit like feels for him. Like it's embarrassing to get in trouble in any way. Like think about like when you were in school, if your teacher was like singled you out to like yell at you for something. Like there is something very embarrassing about that. And I do feel a little bit like embarrassed for him reading these. Not embarrassed enough to not do it, but I agree with you. He's not a good guy, but there is something very embarrassing. I feel embarrassed for him doing this. Also kind of deserved. Okay, the next document has a couple of the text messages that we've already seen. It didn't have all of them, which made me curious if like those were the ones that they were especially focused on, which I found a little bit like it felt like some are missing that I would think they would be concerned about. Hold on. So it starts with that like summary of the chat. So the people in this chat are Chris Moore, Jeff Koskowski, John Fanning, Vito DeChico. Is that DeChico? His first name is Vito. I don't know if I knew that. Yuri Buchanan, and then I'm assuming local user is Tully because this is about Tully. They have 651 text messages. The first one was sent May 26th, 2022. And the last message in this extraction was sent August 26th, 2022. So just in 3 months, they sent 651 text messages, which we love that for you guys. You guys are real chatty. The first one that was highlighted is from Jeff Koskowski, and it's a video. And then Fanning replies, "This vid is blurry." Then it skips, and there's not. Oh, this is May 26th. The next one, I can't see a date, but it's just someone laughed at. I've seen that commercial so many times. I feel like I've been there. But like I said, some of these are, to me, feel just odd that they were the ones that were highlighted. Then Yuri, whose name is spelt wrong, Yuri Buchernick. So tomorrow at noon, our time, boys, on May 17th, 2022. And then Yuri said, "I guess they don't have tomorrow off after all." And there's something really blurry that I can't read. Then Yuri says again, "Postponed till tomorrow at 11 noon our time." I'm not sure if he thinks 11 is noon. DeChico says, "That sucks." Koskowski says, "It's okay, keep the train rolling." And then there's some really blurry stuff that didn't photocopy or that we can't read. Then DeChico says on August 17th, "Jeff, you need a fill-in. We have an appointment at Humboldt. Need you there." And then nothing. Then this is when we know. This is where they sent the picture of Yannetti. What a cutie pie. And then there's a whole bunch redacted. And then it says Yuri laughed at an image. And then there's a whole bunch of blurry stuff, but just the word nude can be seen, which I find kind of funny. Chris Moore disliked no nude so far. Yuri liked funny, "I'm going through his R-word client's phone." Then Yuri said, "How did it go, coach? Got a homicide last night, so couldn't catch any of it." Koskowski said, 10-2 win. Florida next victim tomorrow night. Fanning said semis, ? Koskowski said yes. Chris Moore loved 10-2 win. Then Chris Moore said, "Florida, bunch of frauds. We gonna beat them." And then Yuri loved 10-2 win. And that's the end of that document. I don't get it, really. Do you guys? Like, out of all of Proctor's text message, like if I don't get it. So if any of you do, please let me know. Help me, I'm poor. What movie is that from? Like one of the one movies I've seen. Let me close that. Hold on. Yeah, I'm assuming these are their work phones. Nothing is fully clear to me. And then it's interesting, in the folder, the documents are labeled. So that was exhibit 1, 2, and 3. And then the next document is exhibit 8. Didn't mean to do that, but we will have a fervent break soon. So the next document is exhibit 8. Yes, that was Bridesmaids. I don't know if like documents 4, 5, 6, and 7 are confidential, redacted, whatever it is, or if that they just label things weird. But the next document is what I'm calling Proctor's report card. I'm sure they call it the Massachusetts State Police eval report. But it was completed by Yuri Buchernick on April 1st, 2024. And according to the report card, if you didn't know anything about Proctor, you would think this was like this was like the world's best trooper. So hold on. They have the first category is, let me zoom in a little for you guys. Nope, that doesn't work. Oh, yes, it does. The criteria is knowledge, compliance, application of policy and procedures, rules and regulations, statute, law, orders, and directives. And he's outstanding. It says Trooper Proctor possessed full knowledge and understanding of the laws and regulations of the Commonwealth as they relate to his duties and assignments at the Norfolk SPDU. So he knows what he's doing. He's great. I mean, he doesn't quite know how to get a search warrant, but like, that's probably not important to his job, right? Next, this category I do feel like Proctor probably was very good at. It was follows oral and written direction of supervisors. I feel like Proctor is like a yes man. Like if his boss said do that, he's not like thinking outside the box. He's not like wondering if there's a better way to do things. He's not trying to like reinvent the wheel. Like they tell him to do something and he's like, great. And Yuri confirmed that. He said he's outstanding. Trooper Michael Proctor is great at taking orders and utilizing follow-up questions to clarify same. This is Yuri's third language, you guys. Always ensuring the correct message is being received as it is communicated by the directive or supervisor. Okay. The next category is oral written communication skills. He's a 4 at this one. So he's not at outstanding yet, but he is exceptional, which kind of sounds better than outstanding or like on the same level. They're very positive over there. Yuri writes, Trooper Proctor always writes a clear, concise, and properly formatted report. His work is reviewed by many staff members of the Norfolk District Attorney's Office who also take notice of his work. Great. Nice. The next category is initiative dependability. And Proctor is also outstanding at that, which another one that I feel like that these are his strengths. Yuri writes, being one of the most dependable, reliable, and accountable members of the Norfolk SPDU team, Trooper Proctor is always willing to volunteer for extra assignments in an attempt to help another member. Yeah, I'm sure it's not to get that overtime pay at all. The next category is interpersonal relations, and he is a 4 at this one. He has a little bit of room to grow, but he's still exceptional. Yuri writes, Trooper Michael Proctor displays professional demeanor, composure, dignity, and respect during the performance of his duties, and especially during interactions with the public. This is seen during interviews with witnesses. Well, we didn't get to see that because there's no video or audio of that, but I'll take your word for it, Yuri. This is seen during interviews with witnesses, suspects, as well as victims and their families. Maybe that's the room to grow to a 5. Trooper Proctor is direct and concise when interacting with other members of law enforcement throughout investigations. Cool. The next category is personal appearance, maintenance, use of department equipment. And he's also a 4 in this. He's exceptional, not outstanding. And Yuri writes, appropriate business. Hey, what the heck? Wait a second. Sorry about that. Yuri writes, appropriate business attire is worn by Trooper Proctor on a daily basis. Well, thank goodness. All MSP uniforms are always in good working and serviceable order. Trooper Proctor's unmarked cruiser is always washed and within proper working order and maintenance schedule. Now, he doesn't always leave his GPS tracking on, but that's neither here nor there. At least he doesn't leave his empty beer cans in it. The next category is administrative duties. Where are those uniforms now? They were on his front lawn, last I heard. Administrative duties, and he is outstanding. Oh, we're back to fives. He is outstanding. All admin duties are performed in a timely fashion with close attention to detail. During admin duty desk days, Trooper Proctor, during admin duty desk days, Trooper Proctor is polite and diligent in his responsibilities with the calling members of the public to the Norfolk SPDU phone lines. Additionally, Trooper Proctor's collateral duty as the office's CJIS coordinator further helps all the other members to stay in compliance with standing rules and administrative requirements. Okay. And this is a big one. Investigative ability. He is outstanding. Woohoo! Trooper Proctor has had a high-profile caseload with a lot of eye and pressure from external sources during the entire life of the investigation and subsequent court proceeding. He handles himself and all his cases with the utmost professionalism and competence. He is able to investigate his cases thoroughly and with strict integrity, even with unwarranted and unsubstantiated accusations from the defense attorney on the case. Now, let's break this down a little bit. Let's start at the end. Unwarranted and unsubstantiated accusations from the defense attorney. Well, Yuri, I hate to break it to you, but number one, that's the defense attorney's job. They were substantiated, and you should have known that because you were also a part of that. He is able to investigate his cases thoroughly. He did not visit, we talked a lot about the officers didn't go in the house at 34 Fairview, and yes, that was a problem. Trooper Proctor, according to himself, did not go to the scene. He got a call at 6:40 something a.m. and he just went to the police station 4 hours later. He did not visit the scene that was 1 mile away from his house. Yet he investigates his cases thoroughly and with strict integrity. Cool. You guys, this is a really low bar if anybody's looking for a very easy job, I guess, be a Massachusetts State police officer. I like that. Holy gaslighting, Batman. Yeah. Where did that? Everything's already a mess. Okay. Have the following policy and procedure documents been discussed? Yes. Okay, well, that's good to know. So he did know about the anti-harassment, sexual harassment, and discrimination policy. That's good. And then that's the end of it. This is just administrative stuff. Tully approved it. Proctor didn't have any comments. And that's the end of his report card. Do you think he showed his mom? He looks like somebody who would bring it home and show his mom. The next document is Yuri's report card that Tully filled out about him. And they really don't make this easy. This was through March 31st, 2024, and it was completed by Brian Tully about Yuri Buchanan. The first category is knowledge, compliance, application of policy and procedures, rules and regulations, statute law, orders and directives. And Yuri is also outstanding. Sergeant Buchanan has a thorough knowledge of department rules and regulations. Okay. The next category is follows oral and written direction of supervisors. He is also outstanding. Sergeant Buchanan understands instructions and resolves ambiguity prior to completing the mission. The next category is oral and written communication skills. He is exceptional. A 4, not a 5, not outstanding. He is exceptional. Sergeant Buchanan clearly communicates with members of the public, DA's office staff, and department members under his command. The communication is professional and clear. I wonder why he needed a Webster's dictionary then to define theory. The next category is initiative and dependability. Sergeant Buchanan is outstanding, a 5. He displays his team-centric attitude. Team-centric attitude in all areas of his job responsibilities. He sets the example to the unit in regard to dependability. Okay. That I actually can believe, but I don't know that he's saying, I don't know that what he just said in that comment is necessarily a positive. The next category is, yeah, I guess if we think about it through the lens of like how the McCabe's and the Alberts would fill this out, then like Yuri really is like the best. Like not only is he going to like go out of his way to do everything and anything for you, he's going to like promote your fundraisers. And yeah, he will, even if the case is over, like he will not stop covering for you. Interpersonal relations. He is outstanding. Sergeant Buchanan, proud ambassador of the department. He knows the importance of building strong relationships with our law enforcement partners and exhibits a professional demeanor in all situations. Yeah, he looked real professional, sitting up there all loungy with his arm back and his fists clench. Super professional. The next category is personal appearance, maintenance, use of department equipment. Not only is he a 5, outstanding, Sergeant Buchanan exceeds the department standards. Like if there could be a 6, Yuri would be a 6. Like he sets the trends. He is the one that they look at to know like what they should be wearing. Like he's the reason they all have tight pants. He, every day when he squeezes himself into those 2 sizes too small pants, he is the one to match. The next category is supervisory skills. And he's also outstanding at that. Sergeant Buchanan closely monitors his subordinates' work and holds members accountable for their work product. Well, that's interesting because that's the category he ends up getting punished for. Okay. The next category is leadership and motivational skills. He is also, I bet you didn't see this one coming, outstanding. Sergeant Buchanan embodies the department goals and is a positive role model for the personnel under his supervision. He motivates the members to complete the assignments with a team-centric approach. We really love that. I feel like Tully must have just watched like a TED talk about team-centric. Hey, what the heck? Why does it always do that? That was the end. So I guess my computer knew that and just closed it by itself. I was just thinking, I'm curious if somebody wants to do another one of these FOIA requests. I would love to see Connor Keefe's report card. I'm just curious what like a younger, like, are they just getting 4s and 5s because they've like been in the department for so long that like eventually you just you get up to a 4 and 5 and they're not just going to like keep giving them 2s and 3s, or is like everybody getting 4s and 5s? Just something I'm curious about. Yeah, do they do self-evaluations? I would love to see those too. Jamieson said, I'm guessing they've all got dirt on each other. I agree 1,000%. And yeah, can we get all the report cards? I want to see everybody's like all the time. Like, I feel like that should just be public documents always, no matter what. The next couple of documents, I'll pull the screen up, but they're ones that we're not gonna like go over. Also, I'm gonna put a link when we're done to all these documents so that you can also access them. There's this like general order about the employee evaluation system, and then there's then there is the next document is this employee evaluation system. I think it's like their handbook. So it has like all the like what's in their handbook, I guess. We're not going to read all that. And then we're going to get into the interviews. And before we do, I pulled up a picture of the guy. Oh no, never mind. Hold on. Because like I said before, like I really like to see who these people are that I'm like hearing from. Oh no. I'll pull that up. Here's what we'll do. We're going to do a fervent break. Always, anytime, literally anytime you want one, just ask. And then we're going to get into the interviews. So the first one is an interview by Blanchett with DLT Tully. We're going to get to hear him in his own words.
We be busting taillight in the cannon Sally port. Drinking out of solo cups up in the Sally port. Reviewing grainy footage up in the Sally port. Keep my shopping bags up in the Sally port. Pauly G said they hold liquid terrifically. There must be a reason he made 300 G's. Said it would be over if she just copped the plea. Now it's a whole episode and we're on season 3. Yeah, we're talking Karen Reed, and even though she's free, she can't get rid of these goddamn O'Keefes. Cause how can Paul get laid if there ain't a trial 3? We be busting taillight in the cannon Sally port. Drinking out of solo cups up in the Sally port. Reviewing grainy footage up in the Sally port. Keep my shopping bags up in the Sally port. Organics dancing drunk, getting lit to Creed. Tully still in Cali, interviewing Natalie. Proctor's lost his job, calling up Morrissey. Wonder when and what went wrong with his auto delete. Hey Proctor, I got a question for you. Who's the whack job cutting out? Now get your leaky balloon out in the unemployment line. We be busting taillight in the cannon Sally port. Drinking out of solo cups up in the Sally port. Reviewing grainy footage up in the Sally port. Keep my shopping bags up in the Sally port.
Okay, so this is Michael Blanchett, I believe, who is conducting this interview with Brian Tully. And now we're going to hear from him in his own words. And I feel like we didn't get to hear a ton of Tully in the trial, so it's nice to hear from him. Okay. Today's date is Tuesday, July 23rd, 2024. The time is 11:06. What the heck? I didn't even do anything. Why does anybody know why my computer keeps doing that? Okay, we'll try again. Do I need to close things? Is it mad at me? Okay. It's 11:16 a.m. This interview is regarding Office of Professional Integrity and Accountability case number blah, 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 and is being conducted at Work Bar Needham, 117 Kendrick Street, Suite 300 in Needham. The name of the complainant is Major Keith Egan. The commissioned officer in charge of this investigation is Detective Lieutenant Michael J. Blanchett. The commissioned officers conducting this interview are Detective Michael Blanchett, Detective Lieutenant Jeremy Sweeney. The department member to be interviewed is Detective Lieutenant Brian Tully. Please state your full name, rank, ID number, blah, blah, blah. They introduce themselves. Then they ask him, do you know that this is being recorded? Yes, he does. He understands he's the subject of the investigation. He's familiar with the department's policies and procedures and all the rules. He knows his rights. He's required to answer truthfully. He doesn't have any questions. And the other people present are what seem like maybe a father, son, or brother legal team, Timothy Burke and Jerry Burke. And nobody has any questions. And so they get started. Tully doesn't know the date, even though they just said it. So he asks again, and then he writes the date. Prior to this interview, we discussed that if at any time you need to take a break, just let us know. We will pause the recordings. Or if you need to consult with your attorney, then we'll again pause the recordings. And ultimately, when you've had enough time, we'll resume the interview and return to recording the interview. Okay? How long have you been employed with the Massachusetts State Police? 18 years. He graduated from, is RTT like the what do you call it? Like the pledge class, whatever they're called in the police. He's the 79th pledge class. From my understanding is there's not an audio or video of this, but there could be, and it's just not part of the FOIA request. He didn't have any prior law enforcement or military experience. And then they ask about his history with the Mass State Police. And he says, for the first 6 years, I was in field services in Millbury, Foxborough, and Milton. I was transferred to Norfolk SPDU in 2012. I stayed there through promotions of sergeant and lieutenant. I was appointed unit commander in November of 2021. And what are your duties and responsibilities as the unit commander? Blah, blah, blah. He oversees the administrative duties, and they ask him, are there other personnel that are attached to that unit as well? He says, there is the unit, yes. There are sworn members within the unit. Okay, and can you explain the breakdown of supervisors and troopers that are within the unit? I have an executive officer, Lieutenant John Fanning. In the homicide section, there's one sergeant, Yuri Buchanan. There is a narcotics section who is supervised by Sergeant Keith Pantazellos. And then we have another group that we have two open supervisors spots on our org chart that cover computer crime and sexual assault. Are we being awkward because that was supposed to be Guarino? And then we have an open homicide sergeant spot on the org chart. By open, you mean vacant? Vacant. And who ultimately fills those roles at this time? Lieutenant Fanning or Sergeant Buchanan? And how many troopers are assigned to the unit? Troopers, 13, I believe, currently. And how many troopers are assigned to the narcotics section and homicide section, and where, oh my gosh, guys, I don't even have anything open anymore. Hold on. I literally have nothing open. Why does that keep happening? Okay. Chill out, computer. There's 4 troopers in the narcotics section that fall under Sergeant PanTeZellos. There are 3 in this computer. I'll just call it computer crimes and sexual assault. They report to Lieutenant Fanning. There's currently 6 troopers assigned to homicide. Sergeant Buchanan is the direct supervisor for, I believe, 4 of them. And Lieutenant Fanning is the direct for 2 of them. Then we also have someone from Unresolved Crime Unit who is attached to the office. And also, side note, if anybody's just listening and not watching your screen, I'm not the one who's saying all the time. That's Tully. That is in the transcript. And that particular individual with the unresolved case unit, do they also help supplement as a member of your unit? It's a new arrangement. They report to DLT Robertson. We're still trying to figure out their role, but they're working Norfolk unresolved cases. Okay. Do you recall who was assigned to the unit on January 29th, 2022, which was the date of the death investigation of Mr. O'Keefe? Yes. Who was assigned to that unit then? You want everybody in the unit at that time? If you can recall. Me, Lieutenant Fanning, Sergeant Buchanan. On the homicide side, it was Trooper Dave DeChico, Trooper Koskowski, Trooper Proctor. Chris Moore came in the next day as a transfer on paper. That's all I can recall on the body side. On the narcotics side, there was Sergeant PanTeZellos, Trooper Brian Sullivan, who's no longer with the unit. I believe Kevin Tufts was assigned to the unit at the time. I think that was it for the drug unit. And then this other computer crime, sexual assault, Trooper Kathy Prince, Trooper Nick Guarino, Trooper Connor Keefe. Widow baby Keefy. Okay, for the body side or homicide members, would it just be them that would be assigned to death investigations, or would there also be some cross or supplement from the narcotics members and computer crimes? Everyone outside of Trooper Prince is on the call schedule. So narcotics, this is true. Daniel's pet Merewolf, also a great name, said no one sniffs or clears their throat more than a lying cop. Yeah. It wasn't just a frog in my throat. So narcotics kick into the weekend rotation for unattended deaths. Anything suspicious would be assigned to a homicide person. Okay, and when Trooper Michael Proctor, first transferred into the unit, were you the unit commander then? No. Okay. What was your position at the time that Trooper Proctor first began in the unit? I think I was a trooper, the rank of trooper. Do you recall what year he came into the unit? I want to say 2018. Attorney Burke said to him, so his attorney says, don't guess if you don't know. Good advice. And then Tully says, I don't know. When were you promoted to sergeant? 2019. And then when you were promoted to lieutenant, July of 21. And then you became unit commander in November of 21, at which time you were promoted to detective lieutenant. Yes. Had you ever worked directly with Trooper Proctor when he first began in the unit as a trooper? We were both troopers in the unit. Did you work cases with him, or did he shadow you for investigations? Yes. Prior to becoming the unit commander, did you ever directly supervise Trooper Proctor? I'm trying to think of when I was a sergeant who my direct reports were. I don't recall if he was. I don't think he was. How about Sergeant Yuri Buchanan? Do you recall when he first transferred into the unit? I don't. Attorney Burke just says sorry. Oh my gosh, you guys, I don't have anything open. Why is this happening? Were you troopers together as well? Yes. And did you work with Sergeant Buchanan back then on cases that you can recall? Yes. Okay, did you ever directly supervise Buchanan? I don't recall if I did. And was Trooper Proctor assigned as the lead investigator for the death investigation of Mr. O'Keefe? Dun da da da. Yes. Well, that's funny. Was that something you assigned? The on-call schedule gets generated a month in advance, and whoever's on call for the date that the call comes in would be assigned the lead investigator. And was Sergeant Buchanan assigned as the direct supervisor for that investigation? Much like whoever the on-call person is, the on-call supervisor for the week would be the supervisor for that case if it comes in on their on-call week. Okay, what was your role during that investigation? I had received a call shortly after the initial call came in from Sergeant Buchanan. So we were in constant communication from early in that morning. I ended up responding out to the scene. And who kept you informed of the status of the investigation, and how was that communicated to you? At what point? From the beginning and for the days to follow. Sergeant Buchanan. And was Miss Karen Reed subsequently identified as a suspect in this investigation? Yes. Were you aware that Miss Reed's cell phone was seized? Yes. Do you recall who seized her cell phone? It was during the interview that night. Either Sergeant Buchanan or Trooper Proctor would be the singular person to do it, but they were there during the interview. Okay, were you aware in advance that they would be looking to seize her cell phone? No, they developed information during the interview that resulted in the seizure. It would be nice if we had ever seen that interview to know what that information that resulted during that interview led to that seizure. Okay, do you recall whether there was any issues with her cell phone, such as a delay in accessing her cell phone? It was password protected. We were unable to access it immediately. At some point, did you become aware that Trooper Proctor looked through her cell phone? Yes. And do you recall when this occurred? August of 2023. So the invest was January of 2022. My apologies. Yeah, it's August of 2022 when we were able to access the phone. Okay, and do you know how that access was? And then the attorney says accomplished. And then they ask, was accomplished? Thank you. Sure. Answer. We have Gray Key, which is a software that attempts to bypass passcodes for iPhones in the office. It attempts by brute force entry, so it continues to try different combinations. We had hooked it up, and it took 7 months from the time of seizure. When we got a warrant, attached it, it took that long for the software to accomplish the password break. And during that investigation in the summer of 2022, August of 2022, were you aware that Trooper Proctor, Sergeant Buchanan, and other members of the unit, including Lieutenant John Fanning, Trooper Jeffrey Koskowski, Trooper David DeChico. What is the question? Were you aware that? Just were you aware that? DeChico. And Trooper Chris Moore were part of a group text message thread that had inappropriate communications during that investigation? No. Was it common for SPDU Norfolk members to utilize group text messaging? Yes. Okay, can you explain how they would utilize that? To send messages to multiple people at the same time? Okay, yes, that is what a group text message is. Okay, and the purpose? I can't really testify to how other people use their cell phones or messaging. Was this something that you also, oh my gosh, you guys. Was this something that you also communicated in group text message threads through the unit? Yes. Okay, and what was the purpose of those? Quickly share information among multiple members. Okay, and would that be through work cell phones that were provided by the Norfolk District Attorney's Office? For other members, I don't know how they use their phones. Were you issued a cellular telephone from the Norfolk DA's office? No. Okay, have other members in the unit been issued one? Yes. So why wasn't he? That's weird. So what is the process to get a phone from the district attorney's office? When someone transfers in, they get an option to get one, and that gets set up through the fiscal department of the DA's office. And who is the contact through the DA's office for that? Deb Leahy. Attorney Burke said, did you say Deb? Deb. And not all members opt to get a work cell phone? Correct. Okay. Are you aware if Trooper Proctor had a cell phone that was issued by the Norfolk District Attorney's Office? My dog is like literally banging down the door right now. He did. Okay. And are you aware if he had a personal cell phone? Yes. And in your group text message threads that you would be involved with, would you be in threads that also had Trooper Proctor in them to discuss cases? Yes. And would that be through his personal phone or work phone? I don't know. And when it comes time to upgrade these work cell phones, do you know how often those upgrades occur? Multiple years in between. Okay. And Trooper Proctor was recently relieved of duty. Is that accurate? Yes. And at that time, he turned in his work cell phone. Are you aware of that? Yes. Okay. Do you know if that was his work cell phone that he used back in August of 2022? I don't. And when there is an upgrade that occurs with these work cell phones, are you aware of the process that the member goes through in order to turn that, turn in that phone, where it goes to and how they get reissued a new one? I am. Okay, can you explain that? The IT director or Deb Leahy would contact the member and say they're up for renewal, blah, blah, blah. The IT director is Howard Wong. And Tully doesn't know what they do with the old phones. Okay, now we're getting into the juicier stuff. When did you first become aware of inappropriate communications that were part of this group text message thread involving SPDU Norfolk members that were ultimately used in the court proceedings? following Trooper Proctor's federal grand jury testimony in February of this year. So February of 2024. Yes. And who informed you of that? Trooper Proctor. And what did he inform you as far as the communications? He stated that the communications involved him using the C word, disparaging comments about Miss Reed's appearance, and looking for nudes in her cell phone data. And when he apprised you of those messages, was anybody else present? No. Where did this conversation occur? Was it in person or over the phone? Over the phone. And was this directly after his testimony? Within a couple of hours. And then Attorney Burke says, you're talking about testimony in the grand jury? Trooper Proctor's testimony at the federal grand jury. And Tully says, yes. And with this information, what did you do? Does anybody else's BS alarm go off on this one? I immediately reprimanded him for the content of the messages, discussed how it was unprofessional. I then subsequently contacted Major Coppenrath, who was in my chain of command in DIS, to inform him of the messages. Yeah, he was just clutching his pearls. And when you speak with Trooper Proctor, reprimanding him regarding these texts as being, oh my gosh, as being unprofessional, was that during the same conversation over the phone? It was over the phone, and then I went to his house and met with him. It could have been either one. I'm not sure. Okay, but you did go to his house at some point after this conversation. And then Attorney Burke says, excuse me. Unclear why. And then Blanchett continues the question, and have additional conversations about this. And Tully says, yes. All right. Can you explain how that conversation went with Trooper Proctor at his house? He described his testimony in front of the federal grand jury. He went over those topics I talked about, the use of disparaging words, comments about Miss Reed's appearance, and the looking for inappropriate material in her cell phone data. We discussed I was displeased and angry with the fact that that he had sent those messages. That was the topics of the conversation. Was anybody else present? John Fanning was there for this period. And we're going to hear an interview from Fanning after this about his take on that experience. Did Trooper Proctor expand any further on any additional text messages? No. Were you aware of who else was involved in that text thread? No. Did you have a conversation with Lieutenant Fanning about those text messages as well? Yes. And how did that conversation go? We discussed how they had happened, that we were both unpleased or displeased or angry that they had occurred. Were you aware that Lieutenant Fanning was part of that group text message thread? Or did he indicate that? And the attorney says, objection, when you say a part of, were you aware that Lieutenant Fanning's contact was contained within that group text message thread where these inappropriate text messages were sent by Trooper Proctor? When? At this time? No. When you, in February, that's when we met this time. I did not know. When did you ultimately learn of that? I became aware in March. So he's trying to say, like Tully is saying, that he's having a conversation with Fanning about how, like, oh my gosh, I'm so unpleased about these text messages. And that Fanning's just sitting there like, yeah, wow, like that's nuts. And Fanning didn't say like, dude, like I was on that too. You think they're going to call me for the federal grand jury? Like, you think I'm going to get in trouble too? Okay. Wait, tell Grant to come on here when we're done, because Grant is very good at connecting all the dots. Like, I want to go through these, and then if he can kind of like connect some dots for us, that would be phenomenal. But I want to read everything first. Okay, so then he says he talks to Fanning about it in March. For some reason, it takes a month for Fanning to be like, dude, I was on those texts too. So this conversation with Trooper Proctor at his house occurred prior to March of 2024. Yes. Okay. When you went to Trooper Proctor's house, about how long after having the phone conversation with him in February 2024 was it? An hour or two. Okay, same day? Yes, that's what an hour or two means, sir. And when you spoke to Major Coppenrath, was that also the same day? It was the following morning. And was there any information that Major Coppenrath had for you regarding these texts? He didn't provide any information to me, no. Were you able to review those text messages? No. When? At that time. In February of 2024, no. Okay. When was the first time you were able to review those text messages? And his attorney jumps in and says, do you mean physically see the text messages? And then they ask, or did you ever see those text messages? And Tully says, no. I've seen the text messages. What do you mean, no? Were those text messages broken down to you in a conversation with anybody else other than Trooper Proctor? Oh my goodness. So overarching here, I have signed a non-disclosure order from a federal court order regarding the materials that was turned over, that was gathered during the federal investigation, and that was subsequently turned over to the Norfolk District Attorney's Office. This non-disclosure allows me to just disclose that I've signed a non-disclosure. I cannot talk about the parameters of the non-disclosure, nor can I talk about anything that was contained with the, excuse me. Yeah. Could you just restate only because, and then Burke says, I apologize. I'm recording it. Somebody must have sneezed. Okay. Yeah, I'll try to remember where I was at. I am signed a non-disclosure. I cannot disclose the parameters of the non-disclosure. The non-disclosure here is regarding the materials that was turned over from the federal investigation to the Norfolk District Attorney's Office through the TUI process. As far as dates and times and kind of this line of questioning, I'm just trying to tread lightly to satisfy my requirements for rules and regulations, but also honor the NDA. He signed an NDA March 7th. And for anybody worried about the plant, I just put it there for right now. It has been in the sun. It was through the U.S. Attorney's Office, and the other people who were part of the non-disclosure agreement were Colonel Mon, Deputy Pinkman, Lieutenant Colonel Connors, and members of MSP Legal. And the NDA was still in effect at that time. And he says, I spoke to Lieutenant Colonel Connors. I don't know the date, but I mean consistently in this time period. I don't know if I talked to DCAP Collins about it. I know Lieutenant Colonel Connors. It sounds like a children's book character, had expressed that he wanted me to talk directly to him mostly because he had signed the NDA and not involve any other members kinda in this situation. And he talks to him in person and by phone. And they ask, during those conversations, what was discussed about these text messages? About what I knew about them at the time, which was exactly what I had just shared. I didn't learn anything really new between the beginning of February and March when the NDAs were signed, when we got the material from the federal government. So we talked about those messages, who I knew to believe were on those messages. I didn't have any specific information, but Lieutenant Colonel Connors and I just talked about the messages and who may have been on them. Okay, and in order to decipher who was on those messages, were you provided a copy of those text messages that you were able to review as part of the NDA? No. And how are you trying to decipher some of those numbers or contacts? Prior to my signing of it, I met with Lieutenant Colonel Connors on March 6th, I believe, the day before I signed it. And we were just talking about generalities and what I knew at the time. And I was strictly conjecture about who may have been on them. But I knew that I was not on them. So I made sure Lieutenant Colonel Connors knew that. Okay. Did you offer a to from letter or document through any written means of your conversation and ultimate meeting with Trooper Proctor at his house? No. During your testimony at trial, ADA Lally asked you about what you did when you were made aware of those text messages, what you did. And you testified, you testified that you had a long conversation with him, Trooper Proctor, about the content and nature of them. And you expressed your displeasure at his unprofessionalism and the content of them, and that you reported them up through your chain of command. We just discussed that. All of that is accurate? Yes. And then Burke says sorry again. He must be like coughing or sneezing or something. And when further asked, was he admonished in any way, you responded that he was by you in that conversation. Is that accurate? Guys, what is going on? Yes. Is there anything further as far as admonishing Trooper Proctor beyond having that conversation? He's been relieved of duty and suspended without pay currently. Okay. Did you take any other action to admonish him beyond that conversation? I reported it up my chain of command. Okay. Did you have any discussion with Sergeant Buchanan about his text message responses in that group text message thread? No. Were you aware of those text message responses? After I signed the NDA, I became aware of who was on the messages, but I was precluded from discussing that at the time because of my restrictions in the NDA. Were you aware after the NDA of what the content of those messages were? I was read summaries of them by ADA McLaughlin. La McLaugh is like the keeper of the texts. Okay. I could not look at the document. I could be read it. Okay. So you had become aware by being read those messages, but you did not physically review them for yourself. Correct. Okay. And that also includes Trooper Proctor's text messages. This is funny. I thought that's what we were talking about. I'm sorry. That includes both Trooper Proctor and Sergeant Buchanan's text messages. I'm only aware of messages that were authored by Trooper Proctor. Okay, just clarifying. I know I'm a little confusing here. Sergeant Buchanan had some responses to Trooper Proctor's text messages. Are you aware after the NDA of those responses that Sergeant Buchanan also had? I'm aware of, yes, a response. Okay. And then Burke says a response. And then Tully says a single response. And then Burke says, yeah. And which response was that? a like of a comment of Trooper Proctor beginning to digest the data of Miss Reed's phone. Digest the data. What an adorable way to say looking for nudes. Okay, but did you have any discussion with Lieutenant Fanning about the inappropriate text messages and what he did about them in that group text message thread? No, because I was precluded by doing that with the NDA. When did you learn that Lieutenant Fanning was a part of that group? When I was read in by ADA Laura McLaughlin. And that was, do you recall when that was? Subsequent to my signing, so early March. Subsequent to learning those text messages and who was included in the text message thread, did you have any further conversations with any of those members about the inappropriate text messages contained with that thread? Which members? Of the involved members that were part of that thread? No, I couldn't. And why couldn't you? I was restricted by the federal court order that I had signed. I feel like they're talking in circles here. I can only speak to other people who had signed the non-disclosures. Did you write or direct any other supervisor to write a negative EES or make note for Trooper Proctor regarding those inappropriate text messages? No. Same thing for Yuri. And then he says, and let me go a little further. Or his failure to take corrective action as a supervisor upon seeing those text messages. No, I couldn't because of the NDA. And did you write a negative blah, blah, blah? He's saying he couldn't. So Tully's just saying he couldn't take corrective action for Fanning or Proctor or Yuri because he signed the NDA. Were you ever aware of whether Trooper Proctor or any of the other SPDU Norfolk members had inappropriate text messages in other investigations? I'm not aware of any. Were you aware or did you ever authorize Trooper Proctor to go out with a Canton police officer, Kevin Albert, for alcoholic drinks while driving his department-issued cruiser after working on a cold case with him? No. Was it customary or did you ever authorize SPDU Norfolk members to utilize their department-issued cruisers to go for an alcoholic drink after work? Never. Oh my God. Why? And to answer this question, who is questioning Tully and how did Emily get this letter? The officer is named Michael Blanchett. And I got this letter because an awesome person who goes by Blank Space, this is the person who's doing the questioning, on Twitter did a FOIA request and got these documents for all of us. Queen Corey says, Tully is so full of it with the NDA. He could have asked Proctor who texted. Yeah, it really feels like he's using this NDA as a real crutch of like, I couldn't do anything that you would have expected me to do because I signed an NDA. Okay. Was it customary? Also, like, what a ridiculous question. Like, of course, he's not going to be like, yes, it was customary that I ordered my SPDU officers to utilize their department-issued cruisers to go out for alcoholic drinks. And what was the SPDU Norfolk policy regarding the members' AVL switches in their department-issued cruisers? So that's their like GPS cruisers, their GPS locators that what's his name? Who just did the report on it? My brain's not working right now. Anyways, Ted Daniels. Ted Daniels just did a report on Proctor turning his AVL switch off. Attorney Burke says, can you say when you use the acronym, for the record, can you state what that is? The automatic vehicle locator system. Tully says, pursuant to a letter that I believe the DAs had signed or an understanding with the department, the member is to have the AVLL switch on as they depart their residence to denote the time that they left the residence for a certain period of time. Several minutes, several miles. It can then be switched off while they're on DA time, so to speak. If they're doing investigations under the umbrella of the district attorney's office, like a death investigation. Upon returning towards their home, they're to turn it back on to mark their arrival home. So several minutes, several miles prior to that, they need to turn it back on. It needs to remain on overnight. If they're working an MSP detail or MSP department overtime, it needs to remain on. Question. So when you leave your house, it's on several miles or minutes into the commute. Turn it off while on DA time. After DA time is over and you choose to go out to dinner before heading home, are you required to turn it back on because you're no longer on DA time? Answer, no, you're not required. Well, then what's the point of this? Okay, so they're just required to turn it back on when they're several minutes away from their homes. Yes. And then Blanchette said, okay, if you could just give me a minute here. And then Detective Lieutenant Sweeney asks, would there be a log note made for each time that the AVL switch is turned off, or is that just the general understanding, so it's long-standing basically? And Tully says, general understanding from an agreement between the DAs and the department back when the AVL switches were installed. And then Blanchette says, I just want to show you Trooper Proctor's latest eval report, the report card we just looked at. And this is for the eval period end date of April 1st, 2024, and it was published on May 10th, 2024. Does that look familiar to you? Yes. Okay. His lawyer asks for a copy, and then question. So regarding this latest evaluation report, did you serve as the reviewer for this evaluation? Yes. And Sergeant Buchanan is the rater for this evaluation report? Yes. Did you have a reviewer-rater meeting about these ratings? Yes. Did you fairly and objectively consider each of these ratings and were in agreement with the ratings that were submitted by Sergeant Buchanan regarding Trooper Proctor for this evaluation report? Yes, with the caveat again being that I was under NDA and had knowledge that could have gone into this EES report, but I was prevented from using it or even discussing it at the time. So he's saying that because he signed an NDA, he can't say to Proctor, like, hey, you know that part that says that Proctor's like so professional? Maybe do you want to think about a text message thread that you might also be on? No. He's saying, oh, I signed an NDA, so like I could never discuss anything about anything ever. Question. And looking at the first section for the criteria of knowledge, compliance, and application of policy and procedure, rules and regulations, statute, law, orders, and directives, Trooper Proctor was rated as outstanding. An outstanding shall be issued when the results consistently surpass an exceptional level of competency. In light of what came out in court and what you were aware of, obviously through the NDA, do you believe that this is an accurate description of Trooper Proctor's compliance and application, policy and procedure, rules and regulations, blah, blah, blah? Answer. The correct answer is no, Tully. Just say no. I don't agree with the premise of the question because in addition to the NDA, I was also on the witness list for the trial and I was sequestered. So while I think maybe by May 10th when it was published, he may have testified. I don't know what had come out in court because again, I was sequestered. So now he's not only has his NDA, he was also sequestered. He at this point, he was just tied up in his house, blind and deaf. He couldn't do anything. He could not see, he could not hear, he could not smell, he could not taste. He could not do a single thing with regards to his job. So I don't know what was occurring that courtroom at the time. So given those two caveats, that is why I approve the 5. Now, as we sit here today, it is not a 5 as we sit here today with the knowledge that I can talk freely about and know to be in the public realm. Okay. And would you have that same response to section 2 for follows oral and written direction of supervisors, and specifically for the criteria that Trooper Proctor's electronic communications were courteous and professional? I would have the same answer, yes. And the 3rd section, the same answer. And the 4th section, let me guess, the same answer. Oh, okay. And the last section regarding investigative ability. The comments attached say, Trooper Proctor has had a high-profile caseload with a lot of high-end pressure from external sources during the entire life of the investigation and subsequent court proceeding. He handles himself and all his cases with the utmost professionalism and competence. He is able to investigate his cases thoroughly and with strict integrity, even with unwarranted and unsubstantiated accusations from the defense attorney on the case. Do you have the same response with the criteria that Trooper Proctor's communications for investigating Miss Reed's cell phone, that no nudes so far, funny, I'm going through this or his R-word client's phone, is accurate with this section? And Tully says, well, I had the, and then they say with professionalism. And then Tully says, I had the same, and regarding professionalism, yes, I would say that he was a great investigator, but there were unprofessional comments are the ones you just read. And as narrow for this section, yes, 5 is not appropriate. Well, at least he got to the right answer. Okay. Then the attorney just wants to clarify the portions of this that you've read are not the words of my client, correct? These ratings were submitted by Sergeant Buchanan and approved by Lieutenant Tully. Question, and I have one more eval report for Sergeant Buchanan. I'll give you time to review that. So the report that we're referencing is the latest eval report on Sergeant Buchanan with the eval period end date of March 31st, 2024, and it was published May 6th, 2024. And going to the first set of criteria regarding knowledge, that whole long thing. Did you serve as the rater on this evaluation for Sergeant Buchanan? Yes. And who was the reviewer? Detective Captain Collins. And yes, they had a meeting, a reviewer-rater meeting about the scores, and they were in agreement about the scores. And now they're going to ask the same style of questions. So first, do you believe that outstanding was an accurate rating for that first category for Sergeant Buchanan? I do. I've spoken to him about his messages that came out in court. He knows the rules and regulations, and he understands the laws and regulations of the Commonwealth. As a supervisor for Trooper Proctor, do you feel he meets an outstanding rating for this section? Yes. Cool. Okay. And in the second section, blah, 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 do you also think he's outstanding? They asked to see it for a second. They get a little bit confused for a second. Okay. Then they say, I stand corrected. That is oral communication. So scratch the follows oral and written direction. And then they clarify some more stuff. And then they start confusing each other. And then the lawyer gets confused. Okay. Then Tully says, do you believe that? I do, but I should also, my also understanding of this EES system is regarding his communication. And Sergeant Buchanan is always professional and courteous. While I agree that he may have witnessed one of his subordinates not acting the same way, Sergeant Buchanan is always professional with all of his communications, and I stand by the rating of 4 for this section for his communications. Even for the liked comment, yes. Okay. And moving to initiative and dependability. In light of what came out in court, do you believe that this is an accurate rating for the description of the criteria that Sergeant Buchanan was conscientious and responsible in his performance of duties as a supervisor for Trooper Proctor? Yes. And if we can look at the next section, interpersonal relations. Do you believe that he's outstanding? Tully says yes. And in speaking to him about this, about what he believed that he was liking, yes. Because he did not believe he was liking anything regarding the nudes. And then they say, go ahead. So you did speak to Sergeant Buchanan about his comment. Following the trial, yes. Okay, and if you could explain that a little further. He stated that he liked the comment, his recollection that he was on a detail and had read the message and focused on the fact that we were able to get into the phone 7-8 months later. And Trooper Proctor was going to be able to digest the information. That's what he was liking, was the fact that that was being accomplished. Oh. Like the same way that Brian Walsh was watching those dirty sites because it was his favorite actress in those movies. And that conversation happened prior to this eval report, or was it after? After. And moving down to the next section of supervisory skills, he received an outstanding rating. Do you believe that that's accurate for the criteria that the member must effectively communicate performance standards to maintain a disciplined unit which achieves its goals and objectives, and the member must accept responsibility and be accountable for the performance of subordinate members under his command? Great question. Tully says, I would revert to my answers regarding Trooper Proctor's EESs and the fact that I was subject to the NDA. Anytime that he's stuck, he's like, listen, I had an NDA. I was under sequestration from the trial. I was precluded from using certain bits of information. If I exercised that for assessment of Sergeant Buchanan, then he would be a 5. If I had the ability to use that information, it would not be a 5 any longer. So he's that, and okay, I don't know why I just did that, but that answer said, if I used all the information that I'm supposed to rate him, I would not rate him a 5. But since I didn't, I did rate him a 5. That's what he just said. And moving on to the last section here of leadership and motivational skills. Sergeant Buchanan received an outstanding rating. Do you think that's accurate for the criteria that the member must promote open communication, recognize positive performance, and provide corrective action to subordinate personnel? I stand by that rating. And then Detective Lieutenant Sweeney has a follow-up. You said that you're now assigned an officer from the unresolved case unit. When did they come on board with you guys? It was Trooper Kowski. So he transferred really on paper. And he was formerly member of the unit and just on paper is under that command structure. I don't recall when that happened within the last year. So at the time of the case, he was just a member of the homicide unit. He wasn't in the unresolved case, correct? Then Burke asks to go off the record at 12:13. Then they come back on the record at 12:19. And they say, did you have enough time with your attorney? Tully says yes. And the last questions would be, is there anything else that you can tell us regarding this case that could bring the state police into further disrepute? No. Is there any other information out there that we need to know that could be released to the public, such as any further inappropriate text messages that you're aware of? No. And then they ask him if there's anything else that you feel we should have asked, or is there anything that you would like to add or feel is important or helpful regarding this investigation? And Tully says, I would highlight the fact that my hands were tied by the NDA. Sir, you have highlighted that already. My hands were tied by the NDA and my sequestration. So while looking back at some of these things, you have to understand my restrictions at the time these things were occurring. Thank you. And then they conclude the interview at 12:21. So just over an hour for all that. And that's Tully's interview. Thoughts before we take a fervent break and then look at, there's another, wait. They have two of the same, okay. The next one is Major Leonard Coppenrath, a new character, you guys. Anything? Yeah, a lot of nonsense answers. The date of that interview was Tuesday, July 23rd, 2024. So just after, a couple weeks after the mistrial in the first trial. Widow baby TV is an 8.5. Fire emoji. I like that. Okay. Let's thank you. Let's take a fervent song break. We're probably going to do two because I need a second to breathe. And then we're going to meet a new character. We're going to meet Leonard Coppenrath, who sounds like he's from Old England. Introducing Leonard Coppenrath. Okay. Does anybody have a fervent song that you're dying to hear? I'll play the first one that I see in the chat. And if not, whoa. And also, if anybody can tell me why my computer keeps closing that window, that would be very helpful. Okay. Great. We're going to play Lally. I'm glad you said that. Then I guess we need to do the follow-up with Hank after. We just did the Sally Port song.
Biting my tongue for so long. Fuck you, Hank. Think you're better than me. Fuck you, Hank. You are not Lally. Fuck you, Hank. Think you're better than me. Fuck you, Hank. But why don't we see? I'm a basic kind of guy, I really don't need a flaunt. Smoking 6 packs a day and I'm happy as a hog. All I do is mumble, do I really need any lungs? The trial one jury was just like me, they were hung. Trial 2 came around and you wanna bench me? Not one guilty vote was was embarrassing to see. Need to remind you that my jury was 9 to 3. Take your little OUI and get about the scene. Fuck you, hey, hey. Think you're better than me? Fuck you, hey. You are not lolly. Fuck you, hey. Think you're better than me? Fuck you, hey. Well, why don't we see? Oh, I know what will get us the win. Ask Rachel about his fucking ham sandwich again. That'll prove this beyond all reasonable doubt. Oh, who am I kidding? This shit is a rout. You took this case so damn personally, and I hold that opinion to a scientific certainty. You weasel face, fuck bet, Arca Major P. Even with all the help you got from Beverly, standing ovation. What a robust cross. Psych. Your nerdy ass looks so fucking lost. Just think, $500,000 was all it cost to get our asses kicked in the fucking law. Fuck you, hey, hey. Think you're better than me? Fuck you, hey. You are not lolly. Fuck you, hey. Think you're better than me? Fuck you, hey. Well, why don't we see? Why don't we see? Hey, how'd that case with the middle school teacher go? I hear you're taking more L's than the Commonwealth. Hey! Waiting for your response, Becky. Yeah, yeah.
Today we say a prayer for Adam Lally, the once mediocre prosecutor who stayed mediocre. May the Lord hear our prayer. In the words of Auntie Bell, speak up loudly. Got $500,000 cause of your incompetency. Calling me a nerd with creativity. Your shit was boring just like your delivery. Your monotone ass can't demand more cash. Only idiot to use a hung jury as a brag. A lowly ADA, so you must be a hack. You don't wanna see me get spanky on the track. You ain't good enough to have a private practice. You ain't smart enough to hide your malpractice. I was the star, you were like a fading actress. Hope Welcher spreads his load all over your mattress. I know a lot of times that raps be fiction, but really let these next 2 bars sink in. You ain't skilled enough to get a conviction, even when in a corrupt jurisdiction. As for the aftermath, well, I'm making more cash. As for you, I think I saw you on DoorDash. Man, I kinda feel bad, sitting back with a laugh, counting up on my stacks. But let me end this quite plainly, just in case that your memory's hazy. It was confirmed on the stand that you're lazy when Rosemary made you her baby. Lolly wanna baba, stank. Lolly wanna baba, spank. Lolly wanna baba, stank. Lolly wanna baba.
off that Jameson and ginger. Never thought that I would be a penny pincher. The sweet whacker got me down to my last dollar. I still think she wants this decorated dude. I should call her. There ain't no party like a McAlbert third party. There ain't no party like a McAlbert third party. There ain't no party like a McAlbert third party. There ain't no party like a McAlbert third party. Now they're out here calling us the house defendants. How the hell do we even contest this? Guess Karen really wants her vengeance. Oh shit. Now we're known as the house defendants. House defendants. We the house defendants. House defendants. We are house defendants.
At least my computer doesn't close the songs. Okay. We're ready now to meet Leonard Coppenrath. And I just talked to Grant about coming on to share his thoughts when we're done reading these. Okay. And I'm going to skip over some of the, actually, once I did this and then some of you guys were like, no, read everything. But are we cool with if I skip over some of the like repetitive questions and parts that don't concern Tully and just the blah blah blahs of it all? It is DLT Blanchette again doing the questioning, and it is Tuesday, August 6th, 2024. Okay, good. You guys say skip, I'm on. The time is 10:36 a.m. and it is being conducted at the general headquarters in Framingham. And they're questioning Major Leonard Coppenrath. He is the Deputy Division Director of the Division of Investigative Standard Services. So already we're umming and ahhing. We are nervous, Detective Coppenrath. They're recording it. He knows he's a witness. He knows the procedures. He knows his rights. He signs it. He doesn't have a lawyer there, it doesn't look like. Okay. He's been employed with the Massachusetts State Police since 1986. Wow. He broke in Foxborough. He went to the Division of Investigative Services, Plymouth County SPDU, Plymouth CPAC. He's done it all. VFAS. He was a patrol supervisor. He went to the Plymouth County District Attorney's Office. And they're going over his roles. Okay. Here they get the date wrong. I'm assuming that was January 29th, 2022. He's familiar with the case. Okay. And as a result of their investigation, a Miss Karen Reed was identified as a suspect and ultimately charged and recently tried by the Norfolk District Attorney's Office that resulted in a mistrial. Are you familiar with that? Yes. Okay. Was Trooper Michael Proctor the lead investigator for SPDU Norfolk in that case? He was a case officer. I'm not sure how they refer to it as lead officer. He's the case officer. And was Sergeant Yuri Buchanan the supervisor? Yes. And was Detective Lieutenant Brian Tully the unit commander? Yes, sir. And additionally, was Lieutenant John Fanning assigned as the executive director of SPDU Norfolk during this investigation and trial? Yes, sir. During that investigation in the summer of 2022, are you aware that Trooper Proctor, Sergeant Buchanan, and other members of the unit that included Lieutenant John Fanning, Trooper Jeffrey Koskowski, Trooper David DeChico, and Trooper Christopher Moore were part of a group text message that had some inappropriate communications regarding this investigation? Were you aware of that in the summer of 2022? No. When did you first become aware of it? He says, I'm not exactly sure. I'd say it was just prior to the trial start date. I can't give you an exact date. And how did you learn of these communications? I had learned that there was an investigation that had commenced by the federal government and that a grand jury had been opened. And pursuant to that, I had conversations in on the third deck with our unit that there had been some inappropriate communications outside state police and perhaps within. But I don't know. I still don't know. I still don't know the full content of what was done and to whom and or how it surfaced. Do you recall Detective Lieutenant Tully calling you to advise you that Trooper Proctor, after his federal grand jury testimony, provided information regarding inappropriate text messages? I know that we spoke quite often with Detective Lieutenant Tully. I did. I won't say we. I spoke with him quite often. And I do as I do with most of the unit commanders about different issues, a number of different issues on and off. I know we probably had conversation. I don't remember a specific conversation with regards to any specificity at all, but that there were some things that had been said. I don't know when that took place, so I can't answer exactly any dates and times. You guys, who thinks that Tully just made up that conversation where he just right away immediately called Leonard Coppenrath the second that he found out about Proctor's text messages because he needed him to know how displeased he was? Question. And were there specific text message communications that were ultimately conveyed to you by Detective Lieutenant Tully? Say that again, please. Were there any specific text message communications disclosed to you by Detective Lieutenant Tully? Not that I recall. Okay. Were you aware of an NDA? For who, from? Question. For any members that were bound by any type of non-disclosure agreements? Other than just regular keeping the grand jury intact? No. Okay, so I'm going to just ask you specific questions regarding specific text messages, whether or not you had been informed of these by Detective Lieutenant Tully. So, to the best of your ability, if you can recall, did Detective Lieutenant Tully tell you that Michael Proctor informed him that he called Miss Reed, and I won't say the word, but I'll spell it out, CUNT, in these inappropriate text message communications? I don't recall him doing so. Did Detective Lieutenant Tully tell you that Trooper Proctor informed him that he made disparaging comments about Miss Reed's appearance in these inappropriate text message communications? I don't recall. Did Detective Lieutenant Tully tell you that Trooper Proctor informed him that he was looking for nudes in her cell phone data in these inappropriate text message communications? I don't recall. Did Detective Lieutenant Tully tell you any other information about other inappropriate text message communications by Trooper Proctor during this conversation or interactions? Dun, 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 I don't recall. Did Detective Lieutenant Tully tell you that Trooper Proctor told him about any other information that would be negative for the department or Norfolk SPDU that was even outside of those inappropriate text messages? You're going to have to restructure that sentence. That's a very funny response. Sure. I'm not exactly sure what you're asking. Sure. Was there any other information that DLT Tully provided you that he had received from Trooper Proctor after his federal grand jury testimony that would bring negative light to the department. I don't recall anything specific. Now, that's not to say he didn't. I just don't recall anything specific that was said. Okay. Did DLT Tully tell you that he and Lieutenant Fanning met with Trooper Proctor at his house? He, at some point in the conversations, he has told me that he has met with him. Exactly where, I don't recall. And exactly when, I don't recall. But I know that they had met with him with Trooper Proctor. Okay. And meaning DLT Tully and Lieutenant Fanning together. I don't know about together. Okay. I can't answer that. And when we're speaking about this, we're talking about the time frame after federal grand jury, but prior to the Karen Read trial. Oh my gosh. I know that they had, in conversations with both Detective Lieutenant Tully and Lieutenant Fanning, they had both indicated that they met with Trooper Proctor. Okay. And did they expand on that interaction with Trooper Proctor of what was discussed? Other than the concerns about his well-being, emotionally, mentally, and about the soundness of the case itself in preparation for that, I don't know. Okay. Was there any information that they discussed about the inappropriate text message communications or any other negative information? There had been conversation between myself and DLT Tully, myself and Lieutenant Fanning, myself and Trooper Proctor about the inappropriate nature of these things. The concern, the thrust of it was, did any of it interfere with the investigation? Okay. Do you recall if you were told of the specific text message communications at any time? No. I still don't know all the specific conversations that were sent out text-wise. If you call them conversations, any of the text messages, still don't know them all. Okay. And the ones that we had already referenced, you don't recall those specific ones being told to you? No, I don't. Okay. When you were first informed of these inappropriate texts or this negative information that Trooper Proctor had relayed to Detective Lieutenant Tully, what did you do with that information at that point? That inappropriate, I don't know that I heard it from him initially. Okay, do you recall? And my initial reaction is, did it interfere with the investigation? That was the first and foremost thought process. Okay, and you had also spoken with Lieutenant Fanning and Trooper Proctor in separate type of interactions. Probably both and separate, yes. Okay, and again, I just want to make sure we're clear. It's going to be between the point of Trooper Proctor's federal grand jury testimony and the beginning of the trial of Karen Read is the reference point. And did Detective Lieutenant Tully tell you that he admonished or counseled Trooper Proctor at any time? Yes, we had conversations with both parties, and they had expressed my concerns about anonymity and don't speak outside. So they had talked to him about that it shouldn't be done. Okay, and upon learning that information, did you instruct DLT Tully that as the unit commander, to document, like in a negative EES, make note? I did not. So basically, it doesn't tell him to do anything. Same thing about Buchanan. They talk about the review. They talk about the raider. It's basically going to be a whole lot of the exact same questions that we heard, and the answers are going to be, I don't recall, I don't recall, I don't recall. DLT Sweeney jumps in and says, I just want to nail down. So you don't recall what the specific text messages, the content of the text messages was, but you know that unintelligible. What was that? That seems like something that should have been recorded. And then Leonard Coppenrath says, strike that. I don't know them. I didn't read. It's not that. I don't recall. Oh, okay. The specific messages. I have no idea what the specific content of all the text messages was. But you know that the communication occurred outside the department essentially. Yes, sir. And you basically made it known that Detective Lieutenant Tully had to have conversation with Trooper Proctor about the content or the fact that the communication occurred outside. There's a saying that I commonly use, anonymity is your friend. And that has been expressed to all parties at every rank. And that was expressed to Detective Lieutenant Tully and Lieutenant Fanning. He just turned into a little fortune cookie. And they expressed that that would be sent to everybody in the unit. Question. Okay, and as long as the integrity of the investigation maintained intact, and then he says that was the priority. If you knew the content of these messages, if you knew the specific text message communications as the ones that I spoke about earlier, that Trooper Proctor called Miss Reed a CUNT, that he made disparaging comments, blah, 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 would you have notified your commander in order to go through the channels to the colonel? Answer. Keep in mind, something at the grand jury is a secret hearing. It's not something open for the public consumption. The conversations that, again, not just those specific things confirmed, the entirety of the context and to whom everything was made. I don't like to go with a partial meal to the table. He really is like a fortune cookie. Don't go with a partial meal to the table. You want to have all the information. We still don't have all the information. So, and I get if I have a full story and if the integrity, we have to ensure the integrity of the case, the investigation for the trial. Okay, but if all those things were there, yes, we'd have a discussion. Okay. All that information would have to be forwarded and evaluated and what the impact would be. Okay. He says, I probably would have discussed this. Okay. Do you recall if you had any further discussions? Information was coming. We had further discussions because information was coming from legal and from the top down of information that was traveled across other courses, that information was had. We learned about it in approximately the same time frame. The exactly dates, I don't know, but conversations was had. And okay, anything else? No. Is there anything we didn't ask you? And Major Fortune Cookie says no. As I said, the integrity of the investigation itself, the death of Mr. O'Keefe was of paramount importance. If not, no importance that somebody went outside the department and spoke with whom they spoke and said whatever they said. Nothing that just came out of my mouth makes any sense to me. It's not that it's not important, but it was important to focus on the trial and the investigation itself, and we still don't have all the information. But as of now, nobody's shown me anything that's caused a corruption of that investigation. All right, thank you. The time is 10:59. They started at 10:36. Easy breezy. I think he's retired now. I think this led him to retirement. I believe I saw that. Okay, we're gonna do one more fervent break because then we're getting into Fanning's interview. And I feel like Fanning is a name like we hear a lot, but we don't hear from a lot. And turns out he's a Taka. Oh, there's also General Collins. I'll look over that while we're doing a fervent break and see if there's anything. Because I want to get to Fanning. Okay.
Class, today we're gonna learn how to do accident reconstruction. Does that sound fun? Well, listen up, cause here's how it's done. First thing to do is cosplay as the victim. You gotta buy his sweater, his shoes, and then some. His boxers, his shirt, and his denim. You all look confused. Did I say something wrong? I really need you all to play along. See, I don't have much evidence to work with, so I gotta half-ass it. It won't be perfect. Do me a favor, bring that bucket over here. Well, I was lost, but now I have an ID. You gotta paint your arm blue. What does that prove? I don't got a clue, and neither do you. Could have been a doctor, but I paint my arm blue. Yo, yeah, could have been a doctor, but I paint my arm blue. Alright, next thing up, I need some elbow grease. Yeah. We're gonna send this Lexus up to outer space, cause Hank Brennan won't give me any x-rays. There is no evidence, what do I do? Well, I guess I gotta paint my arm blue. You gotta paint your arm blue. What does that prove? I don't got a clue, and neither do you. That could have been a doctor, but I paint my arm blue. Yo, yeah, could have been a doctor, but I paint my arm blue. 400,000, thank you.
How's long to roast a turkey? How's long till they depose me? Let's all get our stories straight. It's Thanksgiving Day, the McAlbert way. Her name is Jen. Ooh, hey there, Jen. When she hears the ice cream truck, she runs. Run away, Kenny. She calls Carrie. Carrie's a talker. To see if they came her way. Now here comes Nicole. Hey, Nicole. That's Jen's sister. She likes to clean her house. She's so tidy, but has the face of Irish poverty. Those are my words. How's long to roast a turkey? How's long till they depose me? Let's all get our stories straight. It's Thanksgiving Day, the McAlbert way. And here comes Brian. Uh-oh, that's Nicole's husband. Poor thing, he's got a real bad temper. She's scared, but she loves him. Cause he can make calls with his ass. And there's Higgy. Hey there, Higgy. Another guy who makes calls with his ass. So neat. He's got a pocket full of SIM cards. He's headed to the junkyard. Open up your wallets this holiday. Make sure that the McAlberts get paid. What a cost to put your money toward them people who have no remorse. It's a McAlbert third party, and we party hardy. It's a McAlbert third party.
Who cares about Matt is such a funny line. Okay. Lieutenant John Fanning. This is Wednesday, August 7th, 2024. The time is 11:32 a.m. And it was a virtual interview through Microsoft Teams. He knows all the rules. He has Attorney Burke with him. So the same, he doesn't have the team though. He doesn't have the father-son team. He just has dad, Tim Burke. No Jerry this time. He's been employed with the Mass State Police for 19 years. I was a Stoughton police officer from 2002 to 2005. He was in the 78th Pledge class, broke in at the Brighton Barracks, transferred to Danvers, transferred to Framingham. He was on the CERT team. He was a motor vehicle law instructor, a drill instructor, and then applied for the Norfolk State Police Detective Unit, and he's been there since. And he got promoted to sergeant, got promoted to lieutenant, and for the last 12 years, that's been his assignment. And he supervises the homicide unit, and those duties are split between him and Yuri. And you guys, this is so annoying. I swear I'm not doing anything. Okay. He only does the EES for Trooper Gendron, you guys, we met Gendron the other night. He's the one who Yuri investigated the very, very serious case of a woman and her daughter leaving a duck outside of D&E Pizza. So that's cool. Okay. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. We still have the date wrong. So maybe it wasn't a typo. Maybe they actually don't know the date. Morning, Claire. Maybe they actually don't know the date that John died. But we're going to say January 29th, 2022, because we know. Okay. Everybody has a different answer to this one. This is actually so funny. Was Trooper Michael Proctor assigned as the case officer for that investigation? He was the on-call trooper, so yes. By the fact that he was the on-call trooper, he was assigned. So we went from lead investigator, and then he was on-call, then he was the case agent, now he's the on-call trooper. And in February of 2024, which was prior to the beginning of the trial against Miss Karen Reed, were you aware that Trooper Proctor provided testimony in front of the federal grand jury? Yes. And Burke interrupts and says, was he aware before it took place or after the testimony? I wasn't sure about your question. And then he says, those are my next questions. You're jumping the gun. And he says, sorry. Okay. How did you become aware? And Fanning says, I was aware to both. I was aware before his testimony that he had to go to federal grand jury. I was aware that him and Sergeant Buchanan were both subpoenaed to go to federal grand jury prior to that February 1st date. And I was aware that Trooper Proctor testified on February 1st, but Sergeant Buchanan did not. Okay, so on February 1st, after Trooper Proctor testified in front of the federal grand jury, did you have an opportunity to speak with him? I spoke with Sergeant Buchanan. Because it was my understanding and it was their understanding that they were each going to testify at federal grand jury for approximately 2 hours. Trooper Proctor was going to go first and Sergeant Buchanan was going to go after. I had contacted Sergeant Buchanan to see if he had concluded his testimony or had testified yet. and he stated that Trooper Proctor was still testifying. I'm not sure how I learned he finished. It could have been through Sergeant Buchanan. But I was concerned for Trooper Proctor. I was really concerned about his well-being because he had thought he was going to be there for 2 hours, and it turns out he was there for 6.5 hours or so of federal grand jury testimony. So at some point, I talked to Detective Lieutenant Tully and told him we should go to Trooper Proctor's house and check in on him. So just to be clear, we're going to find out more about their concern about Proctor's well-being. But at this point, Fanning is claiming that he doesn't know anything about what Proctor is testifying about. So he's saying that just because Proctor had budgeted in his mind 2 hours for this testimony and it took 6.5 hours, he was so concerned for his well-being that he needed to go check on him. So again, he doesn't know what Proctor is testifying about, but just the fact that the testimony was a little bit longer than they had expected it to be, he's concerned about his well-being. Okay. We were also aware that his wife was away. So they're like, he's left alone in this like dramatic fashion, like he's all by himself and he's worried. Okay. Also, where are the kids? Trooper Proctor was under an extreme amount of stress at that time with everything going on. And again, Fanning is claiming that he doesn't know what everything going on is, but just the fact that it was a little bit longer time on the stand. Yeah, it makes no sense. Okay. So really the focus of the visit was to check in with him and really his well-being. I was really concerned about his well-being. So it wasn't so much the content of his testimony as the reason for the visit, as it was really more to check in and see how he was doing. So he's so concerned that he wants to check in more than a phone call, not just like, hey, dude, how are you doing? He needed to go over there. Okay. Were you at SPDU Norfolk on February 1st at the time that Trooper Proctor was testifying at the federal grand jury? I was various places. That's a weird answer. I was various places. No, I wasn't. I did go to work that day. I was working, and I don't recall exactly where I went. I'm not exactly sure where I went that day or kind of the sequence of events that day, but eventually I did learn that Trooper Proctor was still in there for the majority of the day. And we went to his house later that night after hours, I believe. Okay. After regular work hours. Okay. And question. And were you at the office at some point with Detective Lieutenant Tully to commute to see Trooper Proctor, or was that through a phone call to make arrangements? Phone call. And phone call. Okay. Do you recall where you were when Detective Lieutenant called you? I called him. Okay. And did Detective Lieutenant Tully make you aware of whether or not he had a conversation with Trooper Proctor prior to going to his house that night? I do not recall that. Okay. And did you meet Detective Lieutenant Tully prior to going to Trooper Proctor's house that night? We could have, yes. We may have met before. I don't recall where we met, but we did meet. I'm not positive if we met. I just remember going there, and we were both in our cruisers. I honestly don't recall if we met earlier that night. You guys, can we just pause for 1 second? This is happening August of 2024, and they're talking about something that happened February of 2024. Like, we all have brains. Like, your brain remembers things. Like, where did you meet up before you went on this like very momentous night? Like, what do you mean I'm not positive if we met? I just remember going there. We were both in our cruisers. I don't recall if we met. Okay. Did Detective Lieutenant Tully inform you of some of the information that he was aware of that Trooper Proctor had testified to at federal grand jury prior to going over to Trooper Proctor's house? No. Okay. So Tully thinks they're going there to talk about these text messages that just came out and doesn't tell Fanning, who just thinks they're going there because they're like, he's had a long day. He needs a massage. We should we pick up some milk for him? We can make him some warm milk before bed because he had a long day. Okay. Do you recall if you arrived first? They both arrived at the same time. Crazy. Were there any other department members? No. It was about 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock. Okay. The reason why you and Detective Lieutenant Tully were going there is because you're the one who called Detective Lieutenant Tully with your concerns for Trooper Proctor. That's how I remember it. Yes. Okay. And when you're talking to Trooper Proctor, does Trooper Proctor explain or describe some of the testimony that he provided at federal grand jury to you and Detective Lieutenant Tully? The answer is yes. Just say yes. I don't recall us getting into much content. The feeling that I had was, and it still remains that way, is that federal grand jury's secret. So I didn't really want to get into details with Mike. I let him talk, you know. Really, we came in, how are you doing? Are you okay? You guys, Fanning's a listener. He did speak about his testimony. He stated that it was pretty much all personal texts that, you know, what is going on? You know, right from the beginning through 6.5 hours was pretty much exclusively personal text messages with various people. I don't recall specific detail other than he did have concerns about some things that were brought up that could be brought up at trial about Karen Reed, things that he had said about her, but he didn't get into specifics about what exactly was in those texts. Okay, and just to reiterate and just like put a fine point on this, in Tully's interview, he said that he didn't know that Fanning was on those texts at all. So you're telling me that they're having a conversation with the three of them together in Proctor's living room, and at no point was Proctor like, dude, you know, the text that you're on with me, you know, that thread that we have, that's the one that I had to read. Okay. Anyways, and that they, you know, that he did state that his lawyer said that there could be issues with the job on some of the things that were brought out, meaning, you know, investigations, personnel investigations into some of the things that were brought out in text message. Question. Okay, when you mentioned his lawyer, is that something that Trooper Proctor told you or his lawyer was present? No, that's something he told me. It was just us there, just us three, but Trooper Proctor said that to us. Okay, so I'm just going to ask some specifics of certain text messages, whether or not he had mentioned them to you and DLT Tully while at his house that evening. Did he indicate that he called Miss Reed I'm not going to say the word, but I'll just spell it, CUNT in some of those text messages? No. did he describe that during his grand jury testimony that they asked him with regard to him making disparaging comments about Miss Reed's appearance in those text messages? No, not about her appearance. The feeling that I had was that he had made disparaging comments about Miss Reed, but the actual content of those I did not know. Sir, you were on the text messages. What do you mean the content you did not know? You just had a feeling? You're like, this guy's such a D-bag that like, he's not telling me what he said, but like, I have a feeling that it was really rude. Okay. Question. And he didn't describe that particular text to you and DLT Tully that night? No. And did he describe a text that he had been searching for nudes in Miss Reed's cell phone data extraction? No. Do you recall him telling that night you and Detective Lieutenant Tully? No. Okay. When he did describe some of his grand jury testimony, what are some of the specifics that you can recall him saying that night? It was the conversation, as I remember it, was really kind of the mechanics of what happened. He went in, he was prepared to answer all of these different questions regarding the case. That's what he thought he was going in there for. He had prepped with his lawyer. I remember that when he first got in there, he started getting, the first text was a text between his mother and sister and him, and he was kind of taken aback as I recall that this was the first thing that was, brought up. And that continued for 6.5 hours. I think there were some breaks in there, and he had talked with his lawyer, and really he was just saying that they didn't give him target warnings or anything like that, and that he just continued to answer their questions and tried to redirect them back to the facts of the case as opposed to these text messages. In our entire conversation with Trooper Proctor, I do not remember any specific language that he used other than I left there with the understanding that he had made some disparaging remarks about Karen Reed, and it was likely going to come out in testimony at some point, and that, there was at least some concern from his lawyer that it could lead to a personnel investigation. That was really the extent. I do not recall any specific language, and that carried through until I watched his testimony during the trial. There was never a point where someone told me the specific language that Mike had used in testimony. It was just, I knew that there were things that he was going to have to answer to when he went on the stand. Okay, I want to say one thing. And in my opinion, Proctor knew at that point that they had framed Karen Reed and that Karen Reed wasn't really guilty. And I'm not getting into on this stream how the taillight got there, blah, blah, blah. But Proctor knew that the taillight was planted. So if he's going to the federal grand jury to answer questions about the investigation, he's probably already panicked and has all these like talking points ready about the investigation itself. Wouldn't it be kind of almost relieving for him to be like, oh, you just want to talk about me calling Karen the C word and not actually about how like we broke the taillight and we're taking an innocent woman to trial? Okay, cool. No? Maybe. Anyways, see what I mean by fanning Zataka? Okay, question. When he mentions that there's these various communications with these various people, do either you or DLT Tully make some inquiries to kind of get a pretty good idea of what these communications consisted of? He didn't say who those, meaning who he said those things to, like in text message. Question. Like if he tells you that there were these communications between him and his mother and other people, and they were concerning, did you make any inquiry, or did Detective Lieutenant Tully make any inquiry of what the content of those messages were and what the problem or issue with them were? No. Okay. Because I'll go back to the fact that I know the federal grand jury is a secret process, and I did not ask any more point during that entire meeting with Trooper Proctor specific details. Quite frankly, if I went over there and he didn't tell me anything about it, I would have been fine with that. The whole purpose of that visit was to go there and check on his well-being. He shared those things, again, not specifics, not who those things were communicated with. I do just specifically remember that it started with that communication between his sister and his mother, and that he was taken aback by that. But I did not leave that day knowing who specifically he spoke to. He spoke to you, sir. And whether it was in the office or friends of his. I mean, I obviously learned later when it went to trial, but that night I did not leave with any specific knowledge about the content of what it was and who he was communicating with. Oh my God, he says a whole lot without saying too much of anything at all. Okay, question. I know you refer to the federal grand jury system as being secret, like the proceedings are secret. However, if a witness outside of those proceedings talks about it, then that's not a secret, right? Well, certainly, yeah, certainly it's not a secret because he told someone. But I'm not going to try to break those rules. You know, I'm just doing my best to not be on any federal grand jury's list or break any rules relative to the federal grand jury. Well, the bar is on the floor. Question. So I'll bring it back this way. Were you anticipated to be a witness in the federal grand jury? Not that I was aware of. You weren't subpoenaed? No. Okay. So you weren't bound by the federal grand jury of not to talk about a case. Is that accurate? Yeah, I'm not. No, I wasn't bound by anything with relative to that case. No. Were you aware of a non-disclosure agreement that came later? Yes. Yes. Were you a part of that? Did you have to sign that non-disclosure agreement? I did not. I read it, but I did not sign it. Why? Okay. Were you aware of who the other department members that signed it and were bound by it? Only Detective Lieutenant Tully that I'm aware of. Okay. How long did you and Detective Lieutenant Tully meet with Trooper Proctor that night? I would say an hour or so. So you're so concerned about an hour or two. Okay. And did yourself or Detective Lieutenant Tully admonish or counsel Trooper Proctor for those text message communications while at the house? I did not. And I don't recall specifically what Detective Lieutenant Tully said to Trooper Proctor. I know he was concerned if he was speaking about the defendant and there was disparaging remarks about the defendant. I believe he said something to the effect of, there's comments. There's comments that you made about the defendant. You're going to have to deal with those. The job's going to have to deal with them, but I don't remember specifically how that was said. Yeah. Corey just said, wait, so Fanning read the super secret NDA that no one is allowed to see, but he didn't sign it and isn't bound by it. That part I don't quite understand. And why did they show it to him? But then he was like, nah, I don't feel like signing this. And Ben, I wish to, but Corey is saving her appearances for the sidebars, which we respect and love. So he says that Tully was stern with Trooper Proctor about these things and that they were going to have to be addressed, but I didn't recall any specific language that he used, just that they were disparaging remarks about Karen Reed. That's how I remember it that night. Okay, question. Did you and Detective Lieutenant Tully have a conversation or any type of personal interaction to talk about this information that was provided by Trooper Proctor and how you felt about it. Yeah, so after we did, I talked to Detective Lieutenant Tully, and he was going to make GHQ headquarters aware that there was bad language used in regards to Karen Reed, and that if we had become aware of it, we'll have to he's going to address it. Detective Lieutenant Tully, had taken the lead on handling that, and that was what he was going to do. Detective Lieutenant Tully's a squared away guy. He's a squared away guy. He gets his stuff done. He, once he says he's going to do it, if he needs help from me, he'll ask me. But we never, I shouldn't say we never spoke about it. We didn't speak about that. I knew that Brian was going to make GHQ aware. I didn't follow up on that. And then approximately within the week, Trooper Proctor was brought up to headquarters to speak with legal and Major Coppenrath. Excuse me. And Tully and I knew about that. I believe he notified me that Trooper Proctor was up there with his lawyer, meeting with legal and Major Coppenrath. So after that conversation, we obviously, myself and Detective Lieutenant Tully talk, but I knew that he was handling it, and it was being handled up at headquarters. Okay, question. I'm just going to use your words of how you referred to it, as that Detective Lieutenant Tully was going to advise GHQ of the bad language for Trooper Proctor. What was the bad language? Good question. Well, what he said, I just go back to disparaging remarks. Again, I do not recall any time when I sat with Trooper Proctor that he said, I said this and I said that and I said this. I do not have memory that he was telling us specifics. You were on the text. Okay. And what is the policy, or what is the standard practice at SPDU Norfolk when a member of the unit is to be admonished or counseled? How is that documented? Great question. Well, I think there would be, there's certainly verbal counseling. Typically we would do that. And okay, for anybody who follows Sergio Gennaro, Truth Revealed on YouTube, he would have a lot to say about 4 lines of starting and restarting a sentence without answering it. If it was an instance where you had to interject in front of everyone, so not in this case, a verbal counseling like that, or to bring someone into the office and verbally counsel them, something like this, I would say, counseling them, and probably a negative EES would follow. So he's basically saying you can't get in trouble for anything. Cool. Hello again. Here I am. What is going on with this? Is it that I can't click on it? Okay. Were you ever aware afterward whether or not Detective Lieutenant Tully documented any type of admonishment or counseling for Trooper Proctor with regards to this issue? Well, I think, hold on, let me try something. Well, I think there's a couple different issues. The first I learned of the counseling was when Detective Lieutenant Tully testified. I was one of the few troopers in the office that wasn't sequestered. So I didn't watch every moment of testimony, but I did see Detective Lieutenant Tully did address this with Trooper Proctor as he stated in the testimony. We never talked about that. Brian never told me about that. I spoke to him after the fact, and he said, you know, he had handled it and spoke to Trooper Proctor. In regards to the negative EES and addressing it with Trooper Proctor, as I stated, we had no specifics, or at least I don't want to speak for Detective Lieutenant Tully because his memory, you know, he's a smart guy. His memory is probably a lot better than mine. I do not recall specific language that we would have addressed. I mean, if we knew it, fast forward, which we did, then certainly I think there was a place to address those specific terms and the things we knew. But when I left Trooper Proctor's house that night, I did not have this. I just knew that he had made disparaging remarks about Mrs. Reed and that this was gonna have to, you know, that was gonna come out in testimony, and for sure it was gonna have to be addressed at some point. If we fast forward to answer your question, like 45 minutes later, I saw Trooper Proctor's testimony, not all of it, but at least some of it. But like I said, everyone was sequestered, including Tully. He knew some of the language later because he signed that NDA, but had been read in by the two ADAs. So again, just kind of knowing the position he was in, I'm not exactly sure how he was going to handle that. He did sign an NDA and he was sequestered. Oh my gosh, this man just repeats himself and talks in circles over and over again. I didn't talk to him or anyone else in the office about testimony that I had seen. They weren't watching it. And so I'm not exactly sure how he was going to address that other than verbally counseling Trooper Proctor again, as I heard him say in testimony. And how did you become aware that he was read in on those text messages? Well, I wouldn't say he was read in on those text messages. I'm not exactly sure what he was read in on, but he told me he was going to sign the NDA to be read into those federal documents. Okay. And he never discussed with you afterwards anything about that information? No. He just said it was Trooper Proctor. It was what Trooper Proctor had told us, which they were disparaging remarks or so, you know, something in that, however he said it. But that there was disparaging comments and that Trooper Proctor was going to he was going to get, you know, grilled on the stand about that commentary. Okay, question. Did you have any further conversations with Trooper Proctor or even Detective Lieutenant Tully prior to that non-disclosure agreement about Trooper Proctor's communications? I did not. Okay. Now there's enter a new character, DLT Laliberte. He doesn't have any questions. Okay, now the attorney has a question. Wait, Attorney Burke, do you have any questions? I do. Okay. Sir, good morning. Who is he asking this to? The state police is a paramilitary organization. Yes, sir. And you subsequently learned that the following day, Detective Lieutenant Tully notified his supervisor of the substance of the information that he had learned the previous night from Michael Proctor. Yes, sir. Okay, so the Department of State Police is put on... I was doing so well. Wait. I don't get who they're asking. So they're... Okay. The Department of State Police is put on notice the following day, the substance of the conversation that Lieutenant Tully and yourself had with Michael McDonald. True? With Trooper Proctor, yes. Again, what Detective Lieutenant Tully passed along, I'm obviously not privy to. I wasn't there, but he did tell me he notified up the chain of command. All right, I misspoke. I said Michael Proctor. Yes. So the information that's given to yourself and Lieutenant Tully is subsequently provided to his supervisor, and that's Major Coppenrath. Answer, I'm not sure who it would technically be Detective Captain Jerry Collins and then Major Coppenrath. Okay. And do you know when this non-disclosure agreement was signed by Tully, sometime in March or April? And the EES happened. In terms of what you observed on the part of Lieutenant Tully, you described him as being more stern than you were. Yes, if you know both of us, Detective Lieutenant Tully's a more serious type. I think that's why we work well together. He's a more serious type as he's astute. He's a really smart guy and he's firm for sure. So once I knew he was handling it, I knew it was going to get done. Question, and given the circumstances that this was a federal grand jury and your concerns about secrecy, did you think that Lieutenant Tully's approach or response to learning of Trooper Proctor's disparaging remarks was appropriate under those circumstances? I do. Again, I cannot emphasize enough that Trooper Proctor was under an extreme amount of stress. That doesn't change the things that he had said that at least I learned later through his testimony about Miss Reed, but there was an extreme amount of stress in the office, and in particular, Trooper Proctor. His family was being harassed. All the people around him were being harassed. He got the notes from trial to just throw harassment in when you're feeling overwhelmed. I can't emphasize enough that when we went there, we really were going there for his well-being, in particular because his wife was not home. And I thought Detective Lieutenant Tully handled it well. I felt we were under constraints. I know DLT mentioned that, it's not a secret if he tells us, but I didn't feel it was my place to kind of grill Trooper Proctor and prod and ask what they had asked him. If they ever called me as a witness or something later, I think that would be, it could be problematic. And I do think Detective Lieutenant Tully specifically, was bound by that NDA. I read that NDA. It was, I believe, a 9 or 10 page document. It was very specific that whoever was read in, any of that information was supposed to be used for the state court action against Karen Reed. It was very specific to that. Honestly, I was shocked at how lengthy the document was and specific it was to the state court action against Karen Reed. In addition to his response to learning about at least the overall disparaging comments, he did indicate to Detective Proctor that he was going to have to report it to his supervisors and that Detective Proctor, was going to have to deal with the consequences of his conduct. Yes. Okay. Can they just ask questions that are flow? Okay. And in fact, you now know that's exactly what he did. He notified his direct supervisor and headquarters and about the issues he had learned about regarding these disparaging comments the following day. Okay. So that was the attorney, who's also representing Tully, trying to make them both look good. Okay. Then Blanchette says, is there anything we didn't ask you that you feel we should have asked, or is there anything you would like to add or feel important to help the investigation? No, I think what I just added kind of summed up you know, my interaction with Trooper Proctor and Detective Lieutenant Tully's actions. So no, I don't have anything else to add. And then the attorney says, sir, given your reading of the non-disclosure agreement, was it your impression that that would have prohibited Detective Tully from commenting or making any reference to the disparaging comments in the subsequent April EES evaluation of Detective Proctor? And then Fanning takes the layup and is like, yes, I do. And I would have been, if I was read in and signed that, I think I would have even had concern of passing that information along to headquarters, to be honest with you. I think he did the right, I think Detective Lieutenant Tully did the right thing by passing along that information. I think the job has, I think, they should be concerned and have a heads up about what's coming. But if it was specific language and things like that, I think I would, after reading that, I would be very careful on the wording I used passing that information along to anyone, including his supervisors. Yes. But nevertheless, he did that the following day. Oh no, he did that the following day, correct? Yes, that's what he told me. Okay, thank you, sir. I have nothing else. Thank you, gentlemen. And then Blanchette's like, well, actually, that raises a couple more questions for me. If he knew the specific content of some of these text messages prior to signing a non-disclosure, immediately after being told by Trooper Proctor after he testified in federal grand jury, do you think that information it would be appropriate to document in a negative EES or to be part of the evaluation? And then Choir Boy says, I'll say it again, sir. I did not leave there with specific words or commentary other than that he had made comments about Mrs. Reed that were going to be a problem. I did not leave there with any specific word or, descriptive word, the word that you used earlier. He's like, I would never say that he used. I do not recall him stating specifics like that. Question. And it wasn't in reference to you. It was in reference to Detective Lieutenant Tully. Had he had that information prior to signing a non-disclosure agreement, do you think it would have been appropriate for his evaluation report of Trooper Proctor? I think I'd want to see it. I think I'd want to see it. I think I'd like to see the text messages, and I'd like to read the grand jury minutes before I would take an action like that. I mean, he was just on the stand for 6.5 hours. And, so yeah, I don't know. Me personally, I would have liked to have seen the actual text messages. Or had specifics about them. But yeah, I think there's a lot of different I would say that I would like to see them first before I would take action. Question. So if a department member informs you that they had these specific communications and they're not fabricated, the department member indicates that they're not fabricated, that these occurred, you would still need to see those messages to corroborate before making a full assessment? Dude, you did see them. You were on it. I think question's unfair. I think I would have to sit down and interview him. I wasn't interviewing Trooper Proctor. I would have to sit down and go over and take notes. This was not the intent of that meeting. We were talking about a guy, potentially offing himself. Who? That was the concern. Trooper Proctor. That was the concern when we went to his house. So no, I don't think it was appropriate to stop, take notes, and ask him specific questions about text messages. So, on the one hand, I just want to say great friends. truly, if you're concerned about your friends, like, I love that they showed up for him, that if that's really how they were feeling. And I like do believe that they actually were worried about him. I just don't think they were only worried about Proctor because he testified for 6 hours. I think they knew all of the details, and that's why they were worried. So props to them for being very good friends. We should all learn a lesson about how to be there for somebody in need. But he told you what happened. Like, stop lying. You don't just say like, oh my gosh, I think my buddy is in danger because he testified for longer than he was expecting. Anyways. So no, I don't think it was appropriate to stop and take notes and ask him specific questions about text messages. It was not appropriate and highly inappropriate. The welfare of him was what was the purpose of the meeting. Question. No, I understand. That's not what I was asking. Now Fanning's like turning it around and being like, you're a terrible person. You're asking me a hypothetical, and that was not the situation. So yes, by policy and procedure, sir, 100% right. But in that specific instance, no, that was not the case. That was not the situation. I didn't get into content with him. I don't remember Detective Lieutenant Tully getting into content with him. I don't think that's fair to ask a hypothetical that wasn't even close to the situation we were in. Yes, the question you're asking me, different series of facts, certainly, for sure, but not in that specific incident. Then they're like, attorney. And the attorney says, just so we're clear on this, even assuming for the moment that he knew everything that was in that grand jury testimony, when was the EES due and to be signed and prepared? Isn't that April of 2024? Well, I believe that would be like the normally scheduled one. Yeah, okay, so that's the normally scheduled. I think they can do a supervisory observation report at any time an incident occurs. So they're basically like, why didn't you give him bad grades on his report card? Feels like we have bigger fish to fry, men. No, we just really care about this report card. Then they really repeat themselves here. It's my understanding they interviewed him about federal grand jury, a more formal interview. If there's anything you want to clarify, no. And then they're done at 12:19, and that's that. So from 11:32 to 12:19, so a little less than an hour. And that's that. There's just a couple more files in that in the folder that we'll do one more fervent break, and then we'll just pull them up. It's the like final disciplinary hearings, and then I'll talk to Grant about it for a second if he wants to. I'm not going to talk for too long about it though. I'll let him do his I just want his kind of like big picture. Yeah, see. I just want to hear kind of like what he's. I can't go down a whole Grant rabbit hole right now. We've already been on this for 3 hours, but I would like to hear kind of just like a little bit about where his mind is going with this. So we'll take a fervent commercial break, and then we'll pull up the final documents of like his final punishment, which isn't much. And then I'll check in with Grant.
Yo, it's your favorite cops back with another banger. Now sing after us. We're gon' pin it on the girl. We're gon' pin it on the girl. We're gon' pin it on the girl. We're gon' pin it on the girl.
Well, my name's Trooper Proctor, and I have an idea. Let's take this broken tail light and sprinkle it here. They won't even suspect that it was me, cause I won't even be at the scene. Well, my name is Trooper Tully, and I take it from here. Got the CERT team already there.
They won't suspect that I'm a crook, cause I'll tell them exactly where to look. We're gon' pin it on the girl. 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 Yeah, my name's Berkey, here from the grave. I remember very clearly it was a rainy day when I looked out the window and I said, hey. There was a big piece of plastic on the yard. I said, oh my golly, that looks sharp. And I'll admit that I don't have the best vision, but this piece was as big as a television. Yeah, my name's Pickpocket, I'll save your ass, no matter what question Jackson asks. Mr. Jackson, think you can outwit me? Oh shit, remind me. What's a theory? Well, my name's Morrissey, and I got a treat. I'ma show you how to auto-delete every 30 days, and we're in the clear. Wait, what's the cloud? Oh dear. We gon' pin it on the girl. We gon' pin it on the girl. That's right. We gon' pin it on the girl. We gon' pin it on the girl. Yeah, yeah. We might send you a nude. Our group chats are the best. If that's not good for you, we might send you a racist tag. County Records for all the no-ass bitches.
Morning, Dr. Walter.
Good morning. We haven't been formally introduced. Your whole name?
Robert Alessi, sir.
Robert Leslie. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Got so much knowledge, flow so unique, call it path harmonic. Don't get too close or this nerd will spray. I'm a walking, talking word of the day, hey. But be careful, I'm not all brains. Got a mean left hook that'll change your day. Don't even think about coming for David, or I'll put your blood in an affidavit. With my black gloves, I will legally scalp you. Got me looking like I'm about to tattoo you. In your theory, so many holes I poke. It's more bullshit than the ARCA hoax. Sorry, judge, but let me elucidate before you go and take our experts away. We want the jury to hear the truth, that John didn't have a bruise. It's what you do to me. Call me a lessonator, baby, I'm here for the kill. Talk nerdy to me, I'll be assiduous, baby, you know the drill. It's what you do to me. Call me a lessonator, baby, I'm here for the kill. I'll be assiduous, baby, you know. His cross exams are more like Hell's Kitchen. He'll beat your ass if you catch your bullshit and talk slick to Bob, and you'll have your natty swinging. Circle round your house like my name Ian Whiffen. Mr. Burgess, you're faking degrees. Have you heard of the term mendacity? He knows now. How can a witness be talking so reckless? Send Welcher to outer space with the Lexus. Once I get going, it's real hard to stop.
This happened last time with the song too. I have to download that one again. Okay. Calvert is in the Urban Dictionary. That's so funny. You guys are so funny. So for anybody who doesn't know, those songs are all by Fervent Hosp, and you should follow Fervent Hosp on Twitter and YouTube. Let me pull up, okay. The charge sheet, I think, is just, okay. Okay, so this is from a new character again, Bruce O'Rourke, or to Bruce O'Rourke from Blanchett, who was doing those interviews. Fanning wasn't on the original text chain. That was between his buddies. But wasn't he on the other one that was the one that Yuri liked the text? And Fanning said, I was on vacation, so I didn't see it, because when you're in North Carolina, your text messages don't work or something. I might be misremembering that. Okay. So subject, Brian Pee Tully. Facts of the case. On Wednesday, July 17th, 2024, I was reassigned by Captain Bruce E. O'Rourke to conduct, hold on, I have to make this bigger. I'm trying to read it like from the StreamYard screen now to see if that makes a difference, but yeah. Corey can confirm that texts do work in North Carolina. So, sorry, Fanning. Okay. Regarding Tully's failure to take appropriate corrective action concerning inappropriate text messages between members of the department, and failed to appropriately review and evaluate the performance of those members. This investigation was initially assigned to Detective Lieutenant Stephen C. McDonald. The request for a personnel investigation dated July 12th, 2024 was submitted by Keith Egan, blah, blah, blah. Boring stuff. I'm never going to get to see this. On Thursday, July 18th, 2024, I reviewed Exhibit 567 from the Commonwealth versus Karen Reed trial, which was declared a mistrial due to a hung jury by Judge Beverly Canoni on July 1st, 2024. The exhibit consisted of Apple iOS SMS MMS from the iCloud belonging to Trooper Michael Proctor. The text message conversations contained a total of 651 messages in the chat from May 26th, 2022 to August 26th, 2022. There were less than 30 actual messages utilized as part of this exhibit. The chat participants in this group chat were a Chris Moore, Trooper Christopher Moore, Jeff Koskowski, John Fanning, Vito DeChico, Trooper David DeChico, and Yuri Buchanan, who in Proctor's phone, he spelled Bukurtnik because he's a smart guy. My computer hates me. Yay. The following refers to portions of the exhibit, blah, blah, blah. Tully. Brian Pee Tully. In reference to the text messages utilized as part of this exhibit on August 17th, 2022, Trooper DeChico sent a picture of Miss Reed's defense attorney, David Yannetti, to the group. Sergeant Buchanan laughed at the image. Trooper Proctor said, "Funny, I'm going through his R-word client's phone." And then he texted, "No nudes so far." He texted in reference to attorney Yannetti, "I hate that man. I truly hate that man. I truly hate him." Oh, it's not even "I hate that man. I truly hate that man." I hate that man. I truly hate him. Trooper Moore then disliked the "no nudes so far" comment. Sergeant Buchanan liked the "funny, I'm going through his R-word client's phone." The next communication in the thread was a full day later, sent on August 18th. The communication was a text from Sergeant Buchanan stating, "How did it go, coach? Got a homicide last night, so couldn't catch any of it." That's the part that we read earlier that I don't quite understand how it applies or why it matters. On Thursday, July 18th, I reviewed transcriptions of Trooper Proctor's testimony on June 10th and June 12th regarding the Karen Reed trial. The videos for each day's testimony were saved and downloaded. I wonder if they use Trial Channel. They should. Trooper Proctor testified that on August 17th, 2022, he sent several texts to the above mentioned group. So this is just reviewing what he said during the trial. I'm not going to read all of that. We've seen that 100 times. We could probably recite it at this point. Trooper Proctor testified that on July 19th, he went out drinking with Canton police officer Kevin Albert after they worked on a cold case together. We know that too. Nope, they didn't use Trial Channel. They used Law and Crime and Court TV. Bummer. They missed out. On Thursday, July 18th, he did a lot on that Thursday. I reviewed the most recent Massachusetts State Police EES report. The raider was Sergeant Yuri Buchanan, and it was approved by Tully. And then they just review everything that we just talked about. Yada, yada, yada. They said that he rated him outstanding. So this is just all the stuff that we just looked at. Are there conclusions? Let's see. Talks about that non-disclosure agreement that ruled his life. Recommendations. Okay. Recommendations. After review of all information contained within this report, I respectfully request this case be closed with the following findings. A, regarding the allegation that on or about February 1st, 2024, Detective Lieutenant Brian P.P. Tully did not properly document the negative performance of Trooper Michael D-Bag Proctor for his inappropriate text message communications regarding a criminal investigation, there is sufficient evidence to prove employee misconduct. Sustained. B, regarding the allegation that on or about May 10th, 2024, Detective Lieutenant Brian P.P. Tully failed to properly evaluate Trooper Michael D-Bag Proctor. Despite evidence of the contrary of negative performance, there is sufficient evidence to prove employee misconduct. Sustained. Yay. Regarding the allegation that on or about May 6th, Detective Lieutenant Brian P.P. Tully did not properly document the negative performance of Sergeant Yuri P.P. Buchanan too, for failure to take corrective action as a supervisor for Trooper Proctor's inappropriate text messages regarding a criminal investigation. There is sufficient evidence to prove employee misconduct. Sustained. Regarding the allegation that on or about May 6, 2024, Tully should have given Yuri a bad report card. Sustained. Regarding the allegation that Detective Lieutenant Brian, why? So he should have given, Tully should have regarding the allegation that on or about May 6, 2024, Detective Lieutenant Brian P.P. Tully failed to properly evaluate Fanning. Why didn't we see Fanning's report card? Oh, because it's not sustained. Wait. That one was not sustained, and so everything with Fanning was not sustained. I wonder why. Thoughts? That's weird, right? Like everything with Yuri and Proctor was sustained, but everything with Fanning was not sustained. Regarding the allegation that on or about July 19th, 2022, Tully authorized Proctor to utilize his department-issued cruiser to go drinking with Kevin Albert, not sustained. Well, because he didn't tell him to. I kind of get that one. Regarding the allegation that on various dates in 2024, Tully failed to supervise through proper corrective action SPDU Norfolk members who were involved with inappropriate text messages relative to the Karen Reed murder investigation, there is sufficient evidence to prove employee misconduct. Sustained. Interesting. Right? That's kind of interesting. Okay, so there's that one. And then, is this what I just read? Hold on. Oh my goodness. Close window. And then there's just his disciplinary actions. So this is so that all happened in July. On Tuesday, November 19th, Detective Lieutenant Brian Tully, having waived his right to a trial by trial board, is hereby ordered to comply with the following disciplinary action. So after all of this, oh, what's Exhibit 24? Corey, you're going to have to explain to me what this one is. Hold on. Okay. Let's see. Oh, this is why we need you. So little. Okay, hold on. Concise member history. So concise, they make the tiniest font on earth. He was hired April 3rd, 2006. He was involved in an external investigation that was received September 20th, 2010 for using excessive force. He was exonerated May 17th, 2011. Involved member intake, allegations, enforcement action. I need somebody to explain what any of this means. Internal okay. Corey, help me, I'm poor. What does any of that mean? I don't know. What does it mean? Help me, I'm poor. Close window. That seemed, oh, Grant's here. Maybe Grant knows. Perfect timing. Hold on. Wait.
All right, I'm here. Emily, if you're talking, you're on my stream.
Hello.
How are you
hear
doing,
me?
Emily?
Oh, good. I'm good. We were just looking at Tully's prior complaints against him. Exhibit 24. We pretty much got through everything. What are your...
I got it.
Oh, also, my computer will not keep any documents up. So if I have to pull them up, I can't. What are your kind of like big picture takeaways looking over everything? Because I know how much you love Brian P.P. Tully.
Well, and let me say, so folks should go over to Emily's channel to hear Emily, because for some reason you'll be able to hear my mic, but I can't hear her and make it go through the software. So just go to Emily's channel, the Emily C, and you'll be able to hear this interview. And my thoughts are, I went into that IA report about Brian Tully thinking, I'm going to learn a little bit about why the MSP like tried to cover this up. What I found was that it's very clear that February 1st, 2024 was a big day in the world of the Massachusetts State Police who investigated Karen Reed. Because not only was Yuri Buchanan supposed to testify at the federal grand jury, something we did not know, but the federal prosecutor sandbagged Josh Levy sandbagged Michael Proctor. They told Proctor to come in for a 2-hour interview. He went in there for 6.5 hours, and the first questions were about texts from his mom and sister.
Yeah. Now, do you have a little bit of a feeling like that might have been almost relieving for a second for Proctor, who was worried about having to lie about their investigation and then was like, oh, actually, you just want to talk to me about text? I can do that.
The way John Fanning described it, no, it was the opposite. That
Yeah.
Proctor was ready to go in there to talk about it and then got sandbagged and was like, what do you mean you have conversations with my mom and my sister? So I think he and the unit realized that this was big. This wasn't just what they did with the Karen Reed investigation. This was why was this unit acting the way they were in multiple cases, and what was Proctor saying about it? They weren't worried he was going to hurt himself. They were worried that he had flipped by accident.
So they were going over there to be like, what did you say? And what did you tell them?
And John Fanning literally slipped and was like, I did not want to be on any grand jury list. Yeah, no shit, because you cleared Farwell for Sandra Birchmore. Isn't that right, John Fanning?
Yeah, I thought that line was very odd. Like, he's like, I'm trying to just live my life so that I don't end up on any federal grand jury list. And it's like, you know how you don't have to worry about that so much? Do the right thing.
It's like, yeah, innocent people don't say, I didn't want to end up on any federal grand jury list. It also doesn't make sense in context. He was lying. There was no rule against him getting information from Proctor about the federal grand jury. Witnesses can talk about it.
Wait, say that again. Witnesses can talk about the federal grand jury.
What they testified to at a federal grand jury, unless it's to another witness who is subpoenaed. And Fanning was like, I wasn't subpoenaed. So the IA investigator was like, so let me understand this. He could tell you about what he testified to, but you didn't want to ask because it was a violation of something that wasn't a rule. That was basically how the investigator asked it. And Fanning stumbled over his words and was like, well, I guess he did talk about it a little bit, you know what I mean? But, not too much. And yeah, very, very obvious.
Yeah, so the question where he started to get really weird was, I know you like to refer to the federal grand jury system as being secret, like the proceedings are secret. However, if a witness outside of those proceedings talks about it, then that's not a secret, right? And he said, well, certainly it's not a secret because he told someone, I'm doing my best to not be on any federal grand jury's list or break any rules relative to the federal grand jury or federal law for that matter. Yeah. Seems like that's something you're actually very worried about.
Who says that? Right? Who says that in response to
somebody who has a whole bunch of things in their closet?
Why were you uncomfortable asking? Yes,
Go
and
ahead.
then to
Sorry,
find
there was
out
like a lag.
Tully and Fanning did know each other for 20 years. Oh, sorry, that Tully and Fanning did know each other for 20 years. That they were, in essence, rushing over to Proctor's house after the 6.5-hour session. That Fanning wasn't it wasn't Yuri who was the second in command. Fanning was the second in command. Fanning ran the unit under Tully. He was the executive officer.
Yeah, so Fanning has, okay, can you explain this then? Why do you think at the end when they were going through all of the findings, everything that had to do with Proctor and Yuri was what Tully ended up getting punished for, but the 2 counts that were about Fanning were both not sustained?
Because a number of things. One, I thought it was fascinating that the feds set up an NDA, and this is in the Tully part of the interview. The Fed set up an NDA that forced Laura McLaughlin to read only certain parts of Michael Proctor's messages to Tully, so Tully could do his administrative report about Proctor. What's weird is Fanning was not allowed to sign the NDA, He was shown a copy of it. Fanning was never told what was in those text messages that Proctor was that the Norfolk DA's office got. And Tully wasn't allowed to look at whatever the feds had. Laura McLaughlin had to hold the document. He wasn't allowed to hold it. She had to hold it and read it to him, which means Laura McLaughlin knew the whole time that it was this unit being investigated, and Laura McLaughlin was the feds man on the inside, woman on the inside.
Well, yeah, and now she's still like the keeper of the records. Like when Judge Frenier just made that ruling that like if there's any information in Proctor's text for the other cases right now, that those lawyers should have that information. And Laura McLaughlin was like, but then I'm going to have to be the one to like go through them and like do it. And Frenier was like, yes, you, good luck, have fun. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying, yeah. And it makes more sense now because it's more Laura McLaughlin being like, this is probably still ongoing. I don't think we should be turning this over, but judges like do it anyway.
One thing that I find weird is, number one, it seems weird for Tully to sign an NDA about something he hasn't been made aware of yet. So it's like, you sign this NDA to not talk about something that you already wouldn't talk about because you don't know it yet. And then it seems weird for them to show Fanning the NDA and then be like, hey, do you want to sign this or nah?
I don't think that happened. I think Tully showed him the NDA before signing it because he wasn't bound by it. Once you sign it, you're bound by it. And then once Tully signed it, he then went and got to see, I think what the feds did, this is my best read of it. They thought Tully and Proctor were already obstructing justice and Fanning. So they were like, okay, Laura McLaughlin, you can tell Tully about some of the messages, but we're not letting Tully or anyone on the unit learn about, or anyone in MSP learn about what we actually know. Laura McLaughlin, you can know. She probably has some other NDA of her own, but you must tell Tully just X, Y, and Z. That's it. She's working with them. That's the only explanation with the feds. Do not let Tully know anything that he could bring to Fanning, probably being the target because Fanning was at the center of the Birchmore cover-up. Don't let Proctor onto anything, or Jen McCabe or anyone. Tully talks to Jen McCabe directly on her phone. So therefore, the feds knew this because they had Jen McCabe's phone records. They were like, don't you tell him anything that he can then go to tip these people off. That's the only thing that makes sense.
That makes sense to me. So, and you're saying this like they're the bigger target was what then? Like, why are they doing all of this?
Exactly what Brian Walsh's lawyers put in their discovery motion for Tully's NDA. Why was the federal government in March of 2024 investigating the performance of the state police right in the middle of the Farwell investigation, which started in August of 2023 and ended with an indictment in August of 2024? Why was there a superseding indictment in the fall of 2025? And then why did the death penalty go off the table 2 weeks later? Because Farwell's not the target either. It's Fanning. Fanning's like baffled by all this and sweating and like stumbling over his words because he knows he's the target and they're not telling him yet. I bet he knows now. And they're making sure these guys don't run or hurt anyone before they get arrested. That's what I think's going on.
Interesting. Yeah. And this is like, I'm just trying to piece it all together.
The weight of it all is very heavy.
Yeah. I mean, these are the kind of things like, if that all is true, and I know that this is like kind of how it's supposed to be, like this is how it has to be while they do their due diligence to like conduct a thorough investigation. But it is scary, like you were just saying, to know that like there was a period of time before Farwell was arrested, for example, where they knew what he had done, but they were still building their case. And in that time, he was still a sworn officer. He still had all the power of the police. And I just hate thinking that like there are people that have been like flagged as bad people and corrupt and dangerous or whatever, but in that interim before anything is actually done, they just still continue to have all of the power that they're used to. That scares me.
Yeah. And you got to imagine how freaked out these people might be to talk about the larger context. If, say, they're used to always being able to get their way, always. They can call DCF, they can call this place, and they always can pull it off. What if one time they call and the response is, yeah, we got a call from like a very big FBI office about leaking to you. You're cut off. All right, they're going to panic. They're going to burn everything down. That's what they're doing.
Yes. And that is, I guess, when people are like kind of the scariest, is when like people who have things to hide are scared. Right?
Yeah, and John Fanning's answers, like Tully, like at least lied. I know he lied because there were multiple examples there where he was proven truthful by further information that came out. Fanning was so unartful. Fanning was sitting there like he has like bodies on him. Like, oh my God.
We have a very important question here, which is, what exactly does towel mean?
Oh, got you. Okay, so in 2024, somebody named Stoop the Kid came on one of my YouTube reads of like the pretrial motion documents in the Reed case. And they were like, Grant calls himself a towel. Those must be his pronouns. I thought that was hilarious. So I was like, I'm a towel now. And then it became a whole thing. We have towelettes, washcloths, beach towels, towels with little grapes. You know, Carrie B just walks around with little grapes. She's a little towel with a headband. It's adorable. You don't understand.
I've heard that explanation and it still doesn't totally make sense to me, but somehow it also does make sense. And I love it for you. So great. Okay. So,
there's one more layer to it. There is another layer. Oh, sorry. I know we're lagged. Sorry. So I have to like wait 5 seconds. Can you hear me?
No, you're fine.
But yes, there's a layer to it, which is Towley from South Park gets high and unintentionally solves complex social problems. And then also towels are in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. They're useful and absorbent and fluffy, and I'm a towel.
Yeah, that part actually brings it all home for me. The question I was going to ask you, and then like I need to wrap up soon because I've been sitting here for way too long. I know you can handle that. I truly can't. Is what's next? Like now, what do we do with this information? What now what? Are there more FOIA requests that like can be helpful to add another layer to this? Is there? Yeah.
Oh, I'll give you where I think you can dig deeper. 2 pieces of information. One, in December of 2023, Brian Tully asked Lindsay Gattani who the target of the federal probe was. Completely inappropriate. He and Ken Mello were going to do a grand jury about Josh Levy. This was the spank from the feds. Don't do that. Second, where's this going? I can tell you that Brian Tully, for about 12 months after this, maybe 6 months, was still on the Karen Reed and John O'Keefe case and the Turtle Boy case. Suddenly, in the spring of 2025, this other guy named Trooper Murphy, who's friends with Tully, was brought on, and Tully was just gone. So Tully was, at a certain point, like demoted, re-promoted, okay, then left on just the Karen Reed and Turtle Boy case from a different office, then 6 months later removed from the Turtle Boy and Karen Reed case. And also, by the way, you want to know where I think this is going? I think when Michael Proctor and Brian Tully and Yuri and Fanning realized Proctor's cell phone was coming out, they needed a distraction. The leak of Lindsay's phone to Jason Broyles, who works with Kate Peter, was not to help Jen McCabe. It was to help Michael Proctor. It was a distraction. It's sick. That's why Kate and Tully's messages were removed. They got these guys on obstruction. I'm just waiting for the arrest now.
I feel like what happens when the whole string, like, you know, when you're playing a video game or something, and like a computer game, and you put the last piece of the puzzle together, and then it goes like ding, and it all like rises up. I feel like that's what just happened. What do you think is going to happen with Aiden's charges with that in mind?
I believe that the reason why Nine Vodkas, who's a Kate Peter anti-free Karen Reed person, Koala, who is AFKR, etc., are all melting down, is because Kate Peter worked on the 2023 indictments for didn't disclose it to Aiden in discovery, and now the cases have to be dismissed because the only reason the 2024 charges were no prost is because Kate deleted the evidence Tully submitted to the grand jury. Now that Aiden is going to no doubt call Kate as a witness for a voir dire, the Norfolk DA will no prost the 2023 charges and the 2025 charges. No more leverage on Aiden to get him to try to go against Karen. Therefore, the only thing Kate had left and Tully had left was the moles close to Karen, like Meredith, who were pretending to be FKR when they weren't. I burned all of them, so there was no backup plan. Kate has a recording where Karen talks about being a cooperating informant for Deutsch. Kate was going to try to leak that to knock Deutsch out of the race. I got ahead of it, so I basically kneecapped them. They're done. It's over. Checkmate. I'll be on a space in the next few minutes where I'm going to brag about all this. And Emily, you're wonderful.
Okay. You're wonderful, Grant. I feel like sometimes when I listen to you on your spaces, I can't tell if I'm listening to somebody like descending into madness or like ascending into like a level of like intelligence that like the world has never felt before. But either way, I think you're doing something really important, and I appreciate your perspective, and I appreciate you taking the time to come on here and explain that to us.
Of course. And yeah, it's a thin line between genius and madness, and sometimes like Vinny the Chin, you just got to go along to get along. But yeah, we'll talk soon.
Bye, Grant. Okay. See, I knew he'd be able to connect some dots because it is bigger than just like, oh, they had a little like internal disciplinary whatever, you know? So that was interesting. I'm going to do this. I'm going to play one more fervent banger, and then I'm going to come on here and we'll wrap it up and say our goodbyes and say our keep warms. And then maybe I'll be able to figure out why my computer hates me so much. I think we have to end with this after a marathon of fervent songs.
We believe that we can unlock an iPhone with our ass. We believe that medical science is a bunch of crap. We believe that Sir Isaac Newton doesn't know shit about physics. We believe that Celebrite sometimes makes up timestamps but still is the best in the business. We believe that it is acceptable to rehome your family pet of 7 years. We believe that when we are harassed, that's the only time we shed real tears. We believe that we love John O'Keefe, but our group chat showed no compassion. We believe that sometimes you slip on ice and land on your knuckles. Don't you hate when that happens? We believe in providing law enforcement with specific text strings that make us look good and then destroying the ever-loving shit out of our phones. I'm not done. And then taking that destroyed phone and dumping it on a military base. Totally normal. We believe in manipulating people when they are most vulnerable. We believe we have to tell each other what to say to Channel 4, even though it's supposedly the truth. We believe that you're dumb enough to believe that John's injuries came from an SUV. We believe that if we put a billboard up, we can shift the narrative and point the finger back at the woman who was acquitted twice. We believe in disgracing the memory of a law enforcement officer and turning his tragic death into the biggest spectacle. Now shut up, look the other way, and give us money! Sincerely yours, the House Defendants.
Oh my gosh, I just had to let my dog out. It is so cold outside. Whew. Okay, we're gonna play one more because I need to warm up and then we'll really be done.
Boy Shannon with one in, got the goods to put Karen Reed away. One in Shannon here to save the day. Yeah, this southern boy came to play. Oh wait, no, is that my resume? Yeah, I graduated in 25-3. I mean, that is when I started my degree. Stop asking questions, Bob, would you please? Okay, I don't actually have a degree. Damn it, Bob, why do you persist? Oh, you know, my major doesn't exist. Okay, I think I'm starting to get the gist. Can I change? I'm sweating through my pits. I got the goods to put Karen Reed away. One in Shannon here to save the day. Yeah, this southern boy came to play. Oh wait, no, is that in my resume? Yeah, I'm the pride of UAB. Been going there since 1993. Took a class, then took a year off. Took another one, another year off. Then another one, another year off. Then another one, that one was tough. Think I'll finish in the next decade. After that, what even will you say? I couldn't even spell my first name, but that's okay because I'm getting paid. Got the goods to put Karen Reed away. One in Shannon here to save the day. Yeah, this southern boy came to play. Oh wait, no, is that in my resume? At least this wasn't as embarrassing as Judd's blue paint.
Okay. That was really fun. I can see why Melanie Little likes coming on here and reading documents. It's just a fun way to take everything in and like get your perspective on things. I really enjoyed this a lot today. I just want to say thank you to Kat Randall for gifting a membership and congratulations to whoever got that. And thank you for being the best. And Tortoise Interference said, elementary school teacher, 20 years your senior, you're my hero, you're my hero. That's amazing. And oh my God, I'm still shivering. I was outside for like 7 seconds. Thank you to Gigi's Got Your Back for gifting 10 memberships. You guys are so nice. I love that. And to Joanne Crawl for gifting 5 memberships. You guys seriously are so kind. Thank you for the super sticker. This was really so much fun. What a fun way to spend the day. My advice to you all now is to hop on over to Fervent's channel and just go put on a playlist and enjoy the rest of your day. I was driving around the other day blasting the House Defendants, and truly like puts you in a great mood. I'm very jealous, B Crumbs, that it's 62 there. I'm literally still shivering from being outside for like 2 minutes. It's really cold. Everybody stay safe in the storm. Be nice to each other and have a great rest of your day. Thanks for hanging out with me. This was the longest I think I've ever done anything like this. You guys are the best.
If you need a place to breathe, some stress to just relieve, then come watch Emily see, where we keep it drama free. We want justice for John O'Keefe, Aiden and Kelsey, waved bye bye to Morrissey. Let's clean up Norfolk County. Emily C, the one we need, reading sidebars with Corey, writing Hank diaries, giving the people what they need. It's my pleasure to entertain, keeping you laughing makes my day. Positivity all the way. Why do we tell Satan not today? And now it's time to say goodbye, but before we say goodnight, just keep